some good fish in Canada. Come on, leave your worries far behind where they belong, 'cause we're in for some good fishing. Yeah, they just bite naturally. Yes, we're in for some good fish in Canada. You know
Hi, everybody.
What's going on out there?
You know, all this wonderful technology at our fingertips, and we still can't figure out how to get our theme song to play without skipping. It sounds like
it might be going through to the audience as on skipping. I don't know. You and I are hearing it. I don't know. You never know.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I think this is number 5 of the special guest podcast. So let me just recap quickly, just if I could. On the first one, we had Big Brother Reno joining us, and that's the first time that Reno's been with us in terms of broadcasting anything for, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years.
Yeah.
And that was a monumental event, and we were on for like 2.5 hours.
It was fun. That was fun.
We could have gone for a whole day.
Oh my God, with him, no doubt.
And then we followed him up the following Friday with our good friend, the Doc, Gord Pizer from Lake of the Woods in Kenora, Ontario, who's a regular on our radio program, Outdoor Journal. And that was a blast.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about two contrasting personalities between Reno and Gord.
No. What are you trying to say?
I'm not trying to say, you know.
That's true. Very true.
And then last week, Pete and I had a hard time figuring out how do we top that? You know, we had arguably one of the most popular Canadian anglers in Reno Viola. And then we followed up with arguably, certainly the most scientific and well-known and respected anglers in the nation in Gord Pizer. How do we follow it up? And we managed to figure it out. We got Dale Cronzy.
DC.
on the program. And of course, for those of you who were with us last week, you know how wonderful that was. What an incredible couple of hours we spent with him. And then we looked at each other after that and we said, okay, now what?
Yeah, you know, you do realize we've screwed ourselves now because the next guy, we can't get any better than the next guy, okay?
But wait. I think we may have hit it out of the park. Yes, the Grand Slam. So our fourth is out of the park, and the bases were definitely loaded, and we're thrilled to death that he agreed to come on and spend some time with us here with you today. Let's bring him on, the incomparable, the legendary,
the Roland Martin, Mr. Roland Martin. I got some stats as Roland's coming on here. He's 19. Hey, Roland.
How are you, buddy?
Angelo, wow, what's up?
How you doing, man? Look at you.
You know, I've been doing these little broadcasts on the YouTube, and so Friday I do What's Happening, Roland, and so I haven't done it yet. So when I go out to do my What's Happening, Roland, I'm going to have to recap what we're doing right now because this is kind of cool.
Perfect. Sure. Give us a plug, Roland. That's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah.
So how long have you been doing the podcasting stuff, the YouTube stuff, Roland?
Well, I've been doing YouTube about 2.5 years, and I'm up to 93,000 subscribers. So that's kind of moving along.
You know what? That's good.
These podcasts like we're doing, this is only 3 or 4 of these I've done. So it's kind of new deal. Yeah.
You know what? It's good that Roland's got that many followers because let's be honest, it is a young man's game. That YouTube stuff, that's a young person's game, right? So for Roland to pull that many people watching, that's awesome, Roland.
Well, you know, Pete, what endears me to the young generation is I tell them, I said, listen, I'm an old guy. I can probably tell you how to fish better than I can fish myself. But they listen because I'm giving them some rock solid information. It's a high format, and that's what they want. They want information, and that's kind of what I'm giving them. I'm not trying to be the big hero and win all the tournaments like I used to do 30 or 40 years ago. I'm just giving good information.
Right on.
Let's just start from the very top here. I know this sounds impossible, but I'm going to throw it out there. There may be some people tuning in here in Canada. Certainly, this doesn't apply south of the border, but there may be some people here in Canada tuning in that are not quite as familiar with you as we are. So, Pete, you had a little some stats you want to throw out about Mr. Martin?
Yeah, Roland, please correct me.
Off to the side, I see this guy Tim Sergeson says, Roland, your stuff is awesome. I'm reading the comment.
That's cool, isn't it?
Roland's gonna love this stuff. So Roland, correct me if I'm wrong here. You've won 19 Bassmaster tournaments. Is that correct?
Yeah.
You've
Bass
19
Bass Angler Sportsman Society. Yeah.
and 19 second places in those bass tournaments, I believe, right?
Yeah.
9 Bass Anglers of the Year, BSS Anglers of the Year.
That's why I'm more proud of that. That's kind of the real.
No kidding. That's an accomplishment. Roland is nearly. He has almost 100 top 10 finishes in bass alone.
Right.
25 appearances in the Bassmasters Classic. The guy is like, I mean, that's just some of the stuff right there. He's been inducted into the.
It's a little far, but my son Scott is competing again this year, trying to make the Classic.
That's right.
And make the Elite Series, and I might get an exemption and be able to come back and fish the Elite Series and possibly qualify for another Bassmaster Classic if it all works out with my son. So
that would, you know what?
They over with my fishing yet.
What would tell if give you that exemption? What happens there? How would they deny you? Let's say, or how would you get that? What's the
well, they have an exemption for what they call legendary anglers. They have like 2 exemptions a year, and to get back in. And I've been offered to go back in on the Elite Series and fish back on the high level again. It's just that I decided not to. I decided not to fish the high level. But now that my son Scott is trying to get to that high level and fish the Elite Series, it would be nice to compete with him for a year, particularly, and make maybe the Classic again. That would be
Could you imagine what the 2 of you would do to the whole tournament fishing industry if, for whatever, I mean, it would be a dream come true for all of us as fans. But if you two could ever meet up in the Classic, it would change the game completely.
That final day with the you had a final day, and Roland and Scott are both into fishing against each other on day. Oh my God!
We have made the top 10 on some of the FLW trails and some of the other big tournaments that we've fished together. He's actually beats me out in the long run, but I do pretty well. I hold my own. I'm not as good as I used to be, but when Scott's around, I kind of get a second wind, and I really do well with him, and he and I compete well together.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. We're involved with Scott with Garmin. So once a year we get a chance to spend a bit of time with him down at the Garmin plant and factory, and he talks some stuff about you. Don't you worry. He doesn't mind getting your uniform dirty every once in a while, for sure. Very competitive.
But great angler, right?
I'm reading this guy, Philip Landry. Have you ever had a dangerous experience while recording your show? Boaters, alligators, animals, and stuff like that. Well, a lot of times I'm around alligators. I was just answering that guy's question.
Yeah.
And they don't bother you down here in Florida. They really don't. They just mind their own business and swim away the other way, and they don't ever try to attack. They attack the lure and try to attack the fish, and people think they're trying to attack them, but they're actually just after the fish or the lure. But no, I don't have it. I've never really had any real dangerous experience. I've sunk a couple boats, but I'm a good swimmer and I have a life vest. So
all the time.
Hey, Roland, have you ever, has one of those gators ever bit on your lure or your fish, and you had to lure and bring it into the boat, or not into the boat?
Oh yeah, it happens quite often. Sometimes I'm not watching, and sometimes they'll get right underneath the gunnel of the boat, and you won't see them there, and you go to lift the fish up, and before you can do it, the 5, 6, 8 foot alligator just grabs the fish and the lure and everything. It just swims away, and that's the end of that. But they're trying to eat the fish. That's all.
Yeah.
By the way, Mike, if you see questions on the screen that you want to put up and have us go through, by all means, we're trying our best to have a look on the side, but it's pretty hard when you've got Roland Martin center screen to look off screen. But Mike, if you see anything there that you think you need to put up, by all means, let us know. Here's one here. Ted, our good friend Ted Putnam. Do you ever fish north of the border? So Ted, I think you've talked to him a couple of times, Roland. He owns this incredible operation.
It says, Ted Putnam, do I ever fish north of the border? Well, about 20 times with you two guys. I'm sure I fish north of the border all the time. And in fact, we were just over there this last fall for that Pan Am event.
That's right.
Canada beat the U.S. just by a fraction. And
Yeah.
Scott and I had some great stringers. We were catching 25-pound stringers of bass in just 4 hours, smallmouth bass. That's 5 fish that weigh 25 pounds. Well, actually, we didn't have 25, but some of the teams did. Our best 5 went 23 something. Another time it went 23, like 25.
Yeah.
Came in like second place.
You're talking to St. Lawrence, Lake St. Francis, and Pete and I fish a tournament there every year. And it's hard to believe when you say it, 22, 23-pound bags.
Yeah.
You're not in the top 10.
I know.
So it's a pretty
It's
incredible
scary.
history.
It was incredible. Everybody in that whole Canadian team did well as well. They actually beat us by a pound or so. And our U.S. team did pretty good. We came in second. And then Scott and I came in individually second.
Yeah.
With the strings that we had.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It was a really good trip.
I want to touch on some of the stories of when we had the opportunity to shoot with you a little later on. But right now, what I'd like to do is I know everybody's dying for us to ask, and I have to ask it because I want to know what magic moment took place to get Roland Martin in the fishing industry. Do you remember? Can you go back to that very first time where you knew or you said to yourself, I'm going to be a player in this business, whether it's through television or tournament fishing?
Well, see, my parents were professional. My mother was a school teacher. My father was an engineer, a big doctorate of engineering, and they wanted me to become a professional person of some sort. So I kind of failed out of engineering in college and ended up with a kind of a biology degree, you might say, and all I wanted to do was fish. And they'd say, Roland, you're just wasting your time. You're not going to amount to a hill of beans. There's no future in fishing. This was 50 years ago. And so they said, you're wasting your time. Well, when I won my first BASS tournament, unfortunately, my parents had just passed away. They were killed in an auto wreck, and they weren't privileged to see me win a big bass tournament. Now, the first one I ever won was 1970, and I only won like $6,000 or $7,000. It wasn't a whole lot of money. But I knew right then that's the wave of the future. There is a livelihood to be made, not only just winning tournaments, but endorsing the products that you're using, and then doing seminar work. Because that same year, Ray Scott hired me particularly, and we did a seminar tour with 103 major cities all around the country, growing the membership and promoting bass in general. So at that point, by 1970, I was now a professional fisherman. All I did was either guide, fish tournaments, endorse products, or do television. And that was, so unfortunately, my parents never saw that. But they kept telling me all along, it was kind of I try to prove to my dead parents, if that's possible, that I could be a success. Because they thought I was a black sheep. They thought that I was wasting all my time trying to be a fisherman, and they never saw it come to fruition.
They've spent a lot of time looking down all these years and smiling and being proud, Roland, because you've done a tremendous job, obviously. You mentioned, just one name there. There was so many other names that started up with you at the same time that all have gone on to these illustrious careers. You mentioned just one, but what other big names were kind of playing footsies with you back then?
When I first started my tournament career, Bill Dance was really on top. He was the top angler. He'd won a couple tournaments by the time I started in 1970. I think he had won 2 or 3 before I even started to fish. Yeah. And so he was like the leading money winner, and he was the leading tournament fisherman. And so he and I teamed up. We got together. I really became close friends with Bill. And that fall of 1970, we roomed together in the same room, and I gave him the spinnerbait that he ended up winning the tournament by 7 ounces over me. I lost by 7 ounces behind him. And we were roommates, and we were fishing the same place with the same lures, and one of those kind of deals. So it was really, really cool, first and second. But we worked together for years, and that was a big deal. But of course, Jimmy Houston was another big positive person. in the fishing thing. And then Hank Parker, I mean, there's all sorts of guys that are still current, that are still out there, and still. We lost a lot of good guys. We lost Rayo Breckenridge. We lost Don Butler. We lost, Forrest Wood. There's a whole bunch of guys that are kind of dropping out.
Speaking of Forrest Wood, obviously that whole tournament, the beginning of the tournament era, gave birth to the legendary Forrest Woods boat company.
That sure did.
And I know you've told me numerous stories about, how he would pick everybody's brains and kind of use that to develop things like a Livewell and all that stuff, which is cool.
In 1970, we didn't have catch and release, and I had my boat. I just put up in one of my storage compartments. I just put a pump in there and a little overflow, and I just, for the heck of it, just kept fish alive. Well, also because I was shiner fishing a lot in Florida, so when I wasn't tournament fishing, I'd go down and fish the Rodman Reservoir and some of those neat places in Florida with shiners. So I needed a way to keep the shiners alive. But I'd put the bass in there. And I'd come in from a tournament. Everybody was just throwing them in a box and just killing them and stuff. But I'd come in with live fish. And they'd be all flopping around on the stringer. And they'd say, well, gosh, they're all alive. I said, yeah, let them go right now. So I started demonstrating to Ray and Forrest. Forrest was really, he said, I can do a better deal than that. He says, let me see what you did. So he went ahead and took it to the next level and got the proper pumps and the proper filtration, the proper everything about the aeration system. He worked out a better live well. But I at least showed him that it could work, and I showed it on a Ranger boat.
That reminds me of one of Roland's stories. And this is a good thing for people that are listening. Back in those days, those terms were so raw and so new at everything. And they came up with, if you go on Roland's YouTube channel, you'll see these. They're called Roland rules. That BASS actually had to make up rules because of Roland Martin. So Roland, give us like one or two of those. Like their stories are legendary. You got to listen to some.
The funniest thing, Pete, was the first tournament I ever fished was at Toledo Bend, and I was guiding at Santee Cooper at the time. So I figured, well, I'll just have plenty of time, so I'll go a month early. I'll just went a month early and just fished every day for a month, getting ready for the tournament. First one I ever fished. Well, I met Bobby Murray, and I met Forrest Wood, and I met Jerry McInnes. Unfortunately, he's passed away as well. Anyway, we met all these guys. Ray Mirsky, he's passed away. Don Butler, he's passed away. Anyway, I met all these really famous guys in 30 days of fishing. Well, I came in second. I didn't win that one. I came in second. The next tournament came along. It was Lake Seminole. I go 30 days again, 30 days early. I'm fishing every log, every stump, and I run into this old Mr. Mixon. And he shows me where the bass are spawning. I had to jump over beaver dams and everything else to get into some of the spots in a kind of a smaller little boat. But anyway, when I finally received my trophy, Ray Scott says, Roland, you've had a great success for the first two tournaments. You have a second and now a first. What do you attribute your success to? And like a dumb butt, I said, oh, well, I just practiced for a whole month. I just He says, oh, you practiced for a whole month getting ready for these tournaments. I said, yeah. I know where all the fish are. And he said, we'll have to change that rule and put in a 3-day practice period. That's how that came about.
That was the Roland Martin rule for practicing.
Yeah, there's more than one. He's got about 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah, jet boats on the Connecticut River. That was a big deal. And a polling platform up high. I could see the spawning fish. That was another Roland rule. And I don't know, a whole bunch of them.
Hey, Roland, you remember what was your biggest in terms of professional angling, not broadcast, but in terms of tournament fishing? What was the biggest high that you've ever had? What was that one event, that one moment, that one catch, that one victory or loss that stayed with you all your life? I
think the biggest one I ever did was here at Lake Okeechobee, and it was 1990 something or other, and it was one of the Angler of the Year titles. Larry Nixon was 60 points ahead of me or something, 60, and I was in like third place in the Angler of the Year standings, and I had one tournament left, and it was just hardly any way in the world that I could win it. But I could maybe win the tournament. So I took a hat, regular hat, and I said, win. I said, catch all the. I had all sorts of stuff scribbled over my hat. But win, it's time to win, you know. And so my son, he wrote some stuff on there too, and he was like 12 or 13 at the time. He was pretty young. But anyway, I was trying to win the tournament. I mean, that was my goal. Well, it turned out that Ricky Klon had the same exact amount of fish as I did to win the tournament. But I had one of mine die. It really didn't die. It was really alive, but I didn't argue. When I was going through the weigh-in line, this kid wanted an autograph. And the guy that was weighing in my fish, he says, 5 fish, 4 alive. And I didn't hear him say that because they were all alive. When I got up to Ray Scott, and Ray Scott looks at my bag, he says, 5 fish, 4 alive. I said, Ray, they're all alive. Look, they're all jumping around in there. And you could see them at that point jumping around. All the fish were jumping in the bag. And he said, well, you signed the slip. You said, I said, yeah, but I was signing an autograph for a kid. I didn't even know what happened. So anyway, he said, that's too tough. Well, anyway, end result is Klon beat me by 2 ounces because of one dead fish that actually was a tie deal, but that was my mistake for not doing it right. So anyway, what happened, not only did I come in second by 2 ounces, I won Angler of the Year by like 2 points. Larry Nixon fell out of it. He came in like 70th place. The next couple of guys that were ahead of me, they came in bad, and I won Angler of the Year by the skin of my teeth. And so that was not only a big tournament, practically a tournament win, but the Angler of the Year win as well. It was really, really a monumental thing.
Kind of a high and a low on that one. What is, Roland, if you don't mind me asking, what's the biggest prize, money-wise, the biggest first prize money you've ever won in a tournament?
I won $87,500. Now, see, now some of the big prizes are up over 100, even 200,000, and the like 300,000. So I haven't won anything that big, lately. So therefore, I haven't won.
But that 87 grand, that's over 100 grand Canadian, buddy. So that's still pretty good, and that was back in the day too. So
I went to Japan, and I won this tournament over there, and it's like 3 million yen. I don't know. It was only a couple of times. It's like millions of dollars. I can't figure it all out.
I remember reading a blog not that long ago, about a year or so ago, and this guy was doing comparisons in a variety of different sports and comparing today's prizes and money and victories versus 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 40. And there was a piece in there about Roland Martin and comparing Roland Martin, the Roland Martin accomplishments happening in this millennium versus when you had all your victories and successes, and the margin, the dollar margin versus back then was like 10 times the value. So so he did a quick comparison.
Well, I think Kevin Van Dam, of course, holds all the titles for monies. But I think if I were, like you say, equating all the tournaments to today's standards, I'd be pretty close to him.
Oh, it's crazy. Joe Camissa says, Roland, you introduced me to Mega Strike 15 years ago. Does Angelo, Pete, and yourself use scents today? I'm a walleye fisherman and use 3 or more tubes a year. What's your answer to that? How about scents? What do you think of scents?
There's first of all about scent. Okay, we know that the pheromones either attract fish or scare fish away. So we know that certain people have pheromones that are offensive to fish. So if nothing else, the very bottom line is that a good fish attractant can be a masking agent for people that have bad pheromones, and so it keeps the fish from smelling a bad smell. So that masking agent is one thing. The other thing is a good scent may or may not trigger hunger of some sort. And they say, again, through the pheromone system, that it just makes them swallow it quicker and better. And I've noticed with plastic worms, and I know you guys have done the same thing, particularly with Mega Strike. If I slather up that old Cinco with a whole bunch of Mega Strike, if I wait more than 2 seconds, that's 1 second, 2 seconds, he has swallowed the thing. I mean, he has got it down his throat. So now when I'm using a lot of Mega Strike, I feel that I said, really quick, because I don't want to kill the fish. I want to, because they'll swallow, they'll eat it.
Agreed. And Ange and I use it too, just to answer his question. And we do it on multi-species. We do it on walleye as well. You know what I mean? Not so much on pike. We're throwing swim baits or something like that for pike. But any of those slow presentations that, you know, you're using a plastic bait, absolutely. We still use. And Mega Strike is still the #1 that we use. That we love that. It's a good product. And Roland put us onto that too, him and Bobby.
We used to use Dr. Juice a long time ago.
Right.
And that was a big deal.
That's great.
A couple of our regulars, good friends of ours, Will Wegman and Chonger, want to know about that jet boat episode because they say it was epic and it was a game changer and it was thinking outside of the box. Tell us about that.
Well, the thing about the jet boat was I went over there and I met this guy, Bill Bouchard. He stuttered a lot. He was walking in the parking lot. And I remember he was talking to guys like Shaw Grigsby and 2 or 3 other guys, and he'd walk up to him and say, I'm Bill Bouchard. Anyway, they didn't want to fool with him. He stuttered so bad, they kind of blew him off. Anyway, he walked up to me that day, and he started saying, Roland, I'm Bill. Anyway, he was stuttering pretty bad. But then I realized that he looked like a good fisherman. He had in his wallet some clippings of some of the tournaments he had won. He won several local tournaments and nice big bags of fish. He says, basically, the more he'd talk and the more he'd feel more confident, the less he'd stutter. So finally he'd say, well, you know, Roland, I have some good areas up the river. Well, he'd go up the river. Nevertheless, the more he'd talk, the better he'd get. He could talk. And he said, but you probably need a jet boat. I said, can I get my Ranger in there? I had my Ranger there. He said, well, we can go up there and launch. So we went up there and launched the Ranger, and we fished this pool, an Enfield pool, and all the way up into Massachusetts as well. 3-pound bass, 4-pound bass, beautiful tournament-winning fish. And I said, I can win the tournament here. I said, Bill, are you sure I can't get this Ranger boat all the way up here? He said, I don't think so. I said, let me try to get downstream. So I took this $60,000 Ranger or however much it was, and I tried to float it down the rapids. I ruined it. I ruined this was in the practice. I totally destroyed the hull. I mean, like, it was trash. I mean, I had to get a new boat. But in the process, I told Forrest and everybody else, could I get a Ranger? Let's see, what at the time? I didn't have a Ranger at the time. I had a Triton. That was a Triton. And I called Triton and I said, and I found a jet boat, a jet motor. And so along with me getting a jet boat, Fish Fishburne got a jet boat. Stacy King had a jet boat. 2 other guys had jet boats. There were 5 of us with jet boats. It just so happened that I won the tournament. And when it came out that, you know, I won the tournament, they said, well, we're going to have to make this illegal. Roland won the tournament with the jet boat, so we can't have a jet boat. But there were 4 other guys with jet boats.
It's not funny how that's happened. If you look back at the history of tournament fishing, there's always been that rule change because somebody has won a tournament, which to me has always been rather odd. You know, if you win a tournament because you were able to figure something out, why would they want to punish you by saying you can't do that anymore, as opposed to letting people look at that and say, hey, you know what? Roland won that tournament because he had a jet boat. I'm going to buy a jet boat and I'm going to go compete with it. I could never figure out punishing people as opposed to leaving it open. You know, it behooves me.
Along those same lines, one thing that really bothered me when they came out with the Alabama rig, the multiple fish umbrella rig, so many people didn't like that. Kevin Van Dam, for example, was vehement, said, oh, that's an unfair advantage. We can't do that. But yet, for the tackle industry, it would have been great because they would have sold more lures, and that thing's very expensive. And by the time you rig it up and snag it on the rock, you got $20 worth of tackle. You get to cut another one on, and they're very hard to use. Sure, they catch a lot of fish, but you have to really be on your P's and Q's to use it. You got to know what to do and how to retrieve it, and it's just a hard lure to fish. It's very effective, but it's not just like falling off a rock. It doesn't give somebody an advantage. You really have to know what you're doing.
Right.
Fish on. But yet they passed all these rules and say, oh, it gives the angler an unfair advantage. We can't allow any Alabama rigs or multiple deals. So I don't know.
So is that a rule now? They're on some of the circuits. You can't use an Alabama rig. Is that?
No, you can't use Alabama rig. But there are some circuits that allow it, but not in BASS. And I think they allow it. They've allowed it in Major League Fishing. They've allowed it back to come back in to that, and they've allowed it into the Costa Series, that FLW 2-day event. They've allowed it that. So, but in the regular big FLW, they don't allow it in the Elite Series. They don't allow it in the Classic. So there's a lot of the big tournaments they don't allow.
That's ironic. Van Dam's in the MLF and they allow that back in there. So there you go.
So I want to ask you about that. How what's your feelings on the changes in tournament fishing over the last 5 or 6 years with the advent of, especially the last couple of years, where you're not even bringing fish to a scale anymore? How do you feel?
All right, but you guys are involved in trying to film tournaments. I mean, I've been with you in trying to film tournaments. It is very expensive, and just think if you have 10 or 15 anglers out there, and you got to get a boat and a referee and a judge and a photographer and all. I mean, it just almost it's beyond our budget. You really have to have a big budget to do that. Now, that Major League Fishing has a big budget. It's the hottest thing going right now, but it costs them millions of dollars to produce that. Yeah. And on the practical level, you can't do it with a local bass club. We couldn't afford to do it. You can't do it with hardly any tournaments. It's just a couple of the really big tournaments that have a big budget. Can you do that? Catch and release right there, and have it documented with the camera, and have a referee to weigh them. I mean, that's very, very, very expensive. And Major League Fishing is the only one that can afford to do that.
How do you feel about it, though?
It's the best tournament format. It's the best broadcast of a tournament, because it shows the guys actually using the lures that they catch them with. It's a real live broadcast. And the guys kind of tell you a little bit what's going on, and they'll also do some updates on, how to fish. So I think it's a very good thing. I had a big issue with the fact that for the first couple of years, all they were doing was weighing in little 12-inch fish and catching 50 of them and winning the tournament with little bitty bass. But then they started doing this bigger fish thing, like the 2-pound limit, like on Lake Eufaula and some of the other better lakes. They started doing a bigger limit, and so now you're catching 1 3/4 bass, which is a pretty nice bass. You got to throw it back. So it's come a long ways, and they're getting it all worked out. I've participated in a couple of things. We did a legendary angler thing with Major League Fishing, and Tim Horton and I were teamed up, and we came in second. That was funny. What happened was Edward Evers and Bill Dance were fishing as a team, as part of the deal. And they were right there behind us. Well, somehow or other during the middle of the day, Tim took a little 1.5-pound bass that I caught, and he gave it to the guy to weigh, and he wrote the thing down, and somehow or other they wrote it down twice, the same fish. So we got credit for 1 extra fish. And so at the end of the day, they thought we won. The prize was a big old RV thing worth $16,000 and a bunch of other stuff. And so they're giving us prizes. They're giving me the first prize, giving him and I, like we've won the tournament. Well,
did you know, Roland? Did you know at the time that there was a mistake?
Nobody had a clue, because we had like 20 fish, and you can't keep them all straight. It's like hard to keep. And so finally, the guy says, "Wait a minute! We got a problem. We got a problem." We've gone through all the footage, and we realized you got an extra fish that shouldn't be counted. So they took that 1.5-pound fish away, and we came in second.
By the way, did you ever talk to Bill about that afterwards?
Yeah.
Did you make any comments?
Well, it was funny. It was a fun thing. That was the thing about the celebrity thing. We were just joking around. We had so much fun. We were trying to compete with one another. It wasn't quite on the level of the regular Major League Fishing tournament. The celebrity thing was more a fun thing. It was, we cut up a lot more, playing tricks on each other.
Thank you. I got my assistant there giving us some water, eh?
You got an assistant today. Good for you. Good for
Roland,
you.
the question Stephen Smith says, "Hey, Roland, what's the biggest fish you ever caught? When and where did you get it? The biggest fish you ever caught?"
Biggest fish I ever caught?
I hope you got this from you. I know what you're going to say about this.
I caught a 600-pound salmon shark.
Oh.
What the hell's that?
600-pound Goliath grouper.
Okay, that's not bad.
A big fish.
I think you caught a bigger one than that.
What's a salmon char, by the way? And now
Salmon
they-
is up in Alaska, and they're big old sharks. They eat salmon.
Oh, okay.
We might have an image or two here of a bigger fish. How about that one?
Oh, that's right. Hey, I forgot. Hey, that's right. That's the one. We had two of them.
What's this, buddy?
On a 650. That's the biggest fish. That's the biggest fish.
Let's have a look. Let's have a look.
I forgot about that.
Sports fish in the world.
Hey, we got one off. Look at this. A big old bluefin is taking the line. Son, it's probably could be a $20,000 fish. It's a joint effort now. If I lose it, he's gonna all blame me.
No, we won't do that to you, Roland.
He's taking line
Look at that,
like
eh?
crazy.
Right here, guys. He's under the boat. Under the boat.
That's how important it is. You know, that boat control in this
I
fight
know.
is probably more important.
Well, you know, this is all a team effort. All we are just grunts.
That's all.
We're just the grunts.
Well, that's why they hired us.
That was awesome.
Now, this is probably here in Nova Scotia the largest concentration of bluefins in the world right now.
It is the
Bluefin tuna,
largest
right.
concentration of bluefin
Bluefin
anywhere.
tuna.
They come up here every year, Roland, about the same time. And it's mayhem. I mean, Pete and I have been fortunate enough to be here twice now to experience this, but it's just absolute mayhem. And of course, they're up here feeding on herring.
Uh-huh.
That's the
Hey, Roland, is the drag set okay on that, you know?
I think so. I don't know how many pounds of drag they want. 30? I'd say that's about 30.
There you go. Look at that, eh? One powerful beast, eh, Roland?
Oh, yeah. I don't see color yet.
Not yet,
Oh,
but
you know,
we
we're
wonder how
How deep is
much.
the water? 70 feet deep.
So he could be at least close to the bottom, right?
Really?
So
We got to do that again.
No, for sure.
So
You're right. We do have to do that
you
again.
can't budget for the most part, right?
Can we go this fall?
Look at that thing, just back and forth. He does not want to give up at all. Straight down below, still down deep.
On the top. Bluefin tuna, boys.
Let's get a look at you, puppy. They got it now. They got a rope and a dart in them.
Trying to get his tail. Trying to get his tail, I think.
They got a big gaff. They're gonna throw a big gaff.
Put the big gaff on. Angelo, how heavy is he?
I'm going to think that fish is somewhere between 430 and 460. How's that? Is that close
Okay,
enough?
pretty good.
Really?
We got
Well, I gotta give him over. I gotta give him closer to 600 than anything. How's that?
Are you really?
Ah, I gotta. That head's big. It's hard to say yet, but it's a big one.
Hey, the captain thinks it's 650 to 700 pounds. A hard time if we just had to pull it inboard. How would we do that?
You wouldn't be able to get him aboard.
Oh, heavens.
That's the boom. That's
Look at that fish.
the only thing I have to say is I know something.
That's pretty good.
I guess I was off, wasn't
Pretty
I?
big fish.
Oh,
You were on?
that's not the one.
No.
No,
Yeah, you're right.
just to get that right. I'd like to take the credit as winning that, but that's not the one. The one that you caught that was 813, I think it was, or 800,
Like that.
800 something.
Right.
It's probably queued up, but it wasn't. But regardless,
Hey, we need to do that. Let's go. Can we do that again this fall?
I think so.
It will depend on if the border opens up for you, if you're allowed to come to Canada, right? That's going to be the big thing for us to do that.
And
So,
also that Adrian Goad, the guy from that First Nations band,
right.
Millbrook band of Indians.
Yeah, so
We are First Nations people. I'm sorry.
Yep.
He calls me a lot. He wants me to come back.
yeah.
And
Nice.
he's all happy that maybe we can come back again.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
Just just to let people know what that was all about. I mean, there's a catch and release fishery for tuna, bluefin tuna off our East Coast, which is a very popular form of angling. But there's also a sustenance fishery, which is usually tied in with the First Nations group. And that's what we were fishing on that particular trip. And they have a quota. So they're allowed, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I think it was 5,000 pounds or something of total weight that they were allowed to harvest. And we were fortunate enough to be included.
Yeah, I think it was like a total of like 15 tuna, wasn't it? Or something. I don't know.
I thought it was based on weight, but regardless, we were fortunate enough to be invited to fish for those fish. So they were actually keepers. Yeah. And it was great. We caught, I think the biggest was, I'm going to say 880 pounds, 870 pounds or something ridiculous. But it was great time. Yeah, we'll have to see if we can do that again.
We got the top dollar. We got over $26 a pound.
Yeah.
And we ended up with over $26,000 or $24,000 or $26,000 for the two tuna that we sold. Yeah. And the deal was we didn't get a penny of that. It was all the First Nations. It was the Millbrook First Nations band.
Yeah.
That was good, though. That was
fun. You guys are the best of the best. Big part of history and all the legends, etc., and truly made a big impact on my life. Awesome. I want to talk to you about that, Roland, because I know you feel pretty much the same way Pete and I do. We love, and you do too, talking to folks who have been following you for 100 years. You know, it seems I'm using that obviously. For us, it's part of the benefits of what we've been blessed to do, and that is to talk to people that have grown up with us in the industry and shaking hands and sharing stories, and in a lot of cases seeing 3 generations of them in front of you. You know, you got grandpa, dad, and the kid, and they're all a part of our lives, and for us it's just so important. And I say that knowing how you feel about it, because a lot of our peers don't feel that way. You know, a lot of our peers, they do their thing and they're gone. They don't want to communicate with you. But for us, it's just so important.
I truly have the passion.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm fishing a couple of really choice areas down in the Everglades. And the problem is the night before, I cannot sleep. Now, I mean, I'm an old man. But I'm so up and so excited and looking with so much anticipation for the next day and the first bass I catch, and possibly the biggest bass of my life to be caught again that day, that next day. I have a passion that unequaled. I mean, I can't sleep. I just love it.
That's awesome. That just shows you. For us now, Angie, shows it'll never go away. We know that, right? Roland's proving it won't go away. We get on like the same thing. Speaking of your biggest bass, Roland, what is your biggest largemouth bass ever? What's the story?
I've had 3 real big ones. That one we didn't measure it just right. We thought it was 14 1/4 because what we did, it was down in Florida. It was in a kind of a catch and release place. We didn't have a good scale, so we got a bunch of measurements of it on line. We took some rope and to get the exact measurements, and we figured, and with the formulas and stuff, it looked like it was 14 pounds. Now, I did catch 2 14-pounders in Mexico. One was 14 1/4, got it on camera, and another one that was 14 pounds, got it on camera. And these were scale fish that we put on the scale. Whether or not the scale was exactly right, I don't know. But one scale said 14 1/4, so that's what I'm going by.
One of the
big fish. I caught a big old fish 2 days ago.
Tell folks about it, because I talked to you. I talked to you right after you caught it. Going into the
it was 9.39. Oh, 9.39 pounds. That's a big bass for
No kidding, it's a big bass.
And I caught it just a couple of days ago on a swim bait.
That 4.5 misnomer is that all you have to do if you ever want to get 10-pounders left and right and 12s and 14s, all you have to do is just go to Florida, go to Okeechobee, and you'll get all kinds of. And we keep telling people that listen, although there are 10-pounders down there and there are 12s there, catching them is not necessarily automatic.
The last 10-pounder I caught was 3 years ago on Lake Okeechobee. And it was on a shiner. And it was a funny story because this woman had never caught a big fish, and she was in a wheelchair, terrifically overweight. She weighed 600 pounds. They carried her down to the dock, and 3 or 4 people helped her into the boat, and she just barely wedged in between my seat and my console. And she could only sit there straight ahead. So I'd have to take my boat. We were fishing shiner. I'd take the boat and I'd have to straighten it out and get the shiner just exactly in front of her like this. And by golly, she reeled in a 10.5 pounder.
Nice. Hey, speaking of 10 pounders, okay, aside from Florida, because we know Florida's pretty awesome for a big fish. Where else would you say if somebody said, Roland, I want to catch a 10 pounder other than Florida in the world?
Yeah, Mexico's.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I've taken quite a few really big fish out of Mexico. I've taken a couple of big ones out of the California Delta in the 10-pound class. I've taken a lot of big ones out of Santee Cooper. In fact, I documented 52 that I took back in the 60s and 70s when I was guiding there all those years. So I documented a lot of big fish. But then Lake Okeechobee's been really good, you know. But here's the thing about Okeechobee. Back in 1985, 86, 87, 88, those years, every single day, one of our 25 or so guides, and we had a big guide operation, a bigger one then than ever, and we'd have 25 to 30 guides a day going out of my marina. And there was always at least one 10-pounder every day. But that's been, you know, 20, 30 years, and now there's a 10-pounder that comes in like every 2 months. It's like, you know,
really,
it's not anywhere near like it was.
Why is that, do you think, Roland? Why do you think?
You know, part of it could be water quality. Part of it could be fishing pressure. There are some issues now with weed control, for example. Here's one of the things that bother me. I've been talking to some of the head people from the state of Florida, the WFC, you know, Florida Wildlife Commission. And back a couple of years ago, they had some big contracts levied for the bad weeds, like the hyacinths and the they think not milfoil, but they think hydrilla is a bad. I don't think hydrilla is bad. But anyway, they want to get rid of it. So they had a big contract, some big giant contract. Well, then Hurricane Irma came by 3 years ago. And when it did, it actually tore up the lakes and the grass beds in about 60, 70, 80% of a lot of the weeds were blown away from the hurricane and all the rough water. Wow. So that in itself, they should have just suspended the whole contract. They shouldn't have gone in with any more weed control because they didn't need it at that point. In other words, they had already been controlled with the hurricane.
Right.
But instead, they had these $1 billion contract that they had already had appropriated the money from the state legislature. So they went ahead with this weed control like they'd planned to do in the first place. But there aren't any weeds left. So now they're just nuking everything. So now it does too much. You know, it wasn't just a little bit of weed control. It was just too much weed control. At this point, we have a lake with hardly any weeds. And, you know, that means hardly any fish.
Do you get involved politically speaking?
Yeah, they blackballed me because I had my big ideas about weed control, and I had other big ideas about wanting to get F1 generation. You know, that's the, you know, F1 fish or the cross, you know, between Florida largemouth and the northern largemouth. You know, and they're a bigger fish. You know, that F1 generation always is bigger. I wanted to get them going. And the director of Fish and Game here in this state said, no, we can't pollute our fine fishery with genetically altered fish. We have the best fish. And I said, no, you don't have the best fish. The F1s that are in California and Texas and all the other states that they have those big F1 programs, they have the big fish. We don't have Florida. Don't have
you know what? It's what Roland was saying too about the weeds, and everybody should listen to this. A lot of people still to this day complain about the lakes are too weedy. There's so many weeds, they can't catch fish. But those weeds are essential to fish growth of all species. I mean, walleye, largemouth, smallmouth, all these fish, they really use the muskies. They use weed beds to feed in. There's everything is a whole biodiversity in there that they have to have weeds in these lakes. And then when they wipe away, like Roland says, you're going to lose.
I know you've done this, Pete, and I know I've done it. I did it with a couple of the research doctors that I fished with. We'd take nets and just scrape along the weeds and take a white bucket and just put the net, whatever's in the net, into the white bucket and look at it. There's thousands of little daffia, little baby shrimp,
That's right.
little baby crawfish, and just things are almost microscopic, but it's just millions of them. Every net has a whole bunch. Now, that feeds the food chain. That feeds the shiners. That feeds the bluegill. And the whole thing is kind of it starts with the weeds and starts with the microorganisms and starts with the biodiversity that you have from all those weeds. And then without that, it collapses. Everything just...
Hey, I want to talk about the importance of weeds because you put on the fishing clinic of all time one time a few years ago on the French River, and I want to talk about that. And weeds had a lot to do with it. Before we do that, though, Mike has been patiently putting up some of the questions that folks want.
Oh yeah, we went up there.
So Mike, if you can go back to you had one up there about TJ. There you go. So Monster Carp Tackle is his name. He wants to know about TJ Stallings. Does that name ring a bell, Roland? Wants to know if you've got a story to share about TJ Stallings.
I'm trying to get the name. The name is what? TJ.
TJ Stallings.
Yeah.
This guy seems to be under the impression that you've got some kind of a story or connection with TJ Stallings. I'll let you think about that one for a few minutes. Go to the next one, Mike. Hey, Roland, you were at Ketchinenny Lodge a few years ago. Yeah, it was a few years ago on Lake Temagami. Are you ever going to go back? Roland, this is where we went after we finished filming that series, The Last Call.
That one day. Remember the fog? We were lost.
Yeah.
We didn't know where the shoreline was.
Exactly.
We were out in the middle of the fog catching them.
Remember that? That was incredible. And the story that I tell over and over again about that experience. First of all, the fog, it was like you could cut it with a knife. And here we are out in the middle of this massive lake, and we can't see anything, but we can start hearing stuff like little splashes and stuff. And I remember Roland, and I was with you the night before when we had talked to a person who knew the lake really well, and he told us about this area, and that's where we were headed that morning, this area between two big land masses, and it was a tight little channel, and he said he had been just slaying the smallmouth in there, and that's where we headed the next morning, but the fog stopped us. We got hunkered down in this rocky area, afraid to move, but you kept hearing splashes, and I could hear them though. And so anyways, we made our way over there, and we find ourselves in about 40 feet of water in between
the middle of the lake.
Do you remember that? And
crazy.
And that's where I first discovered that you can catch bass on topwater baits in 40 feet of water, because that's what we did. You remember we shot a whole episode.
That was really cool.
It was great. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great body of water. We talked about it last week, Pete. Somebody was asking about that as well. Great body of water, but boy, you got to really know where you're going on that lake.
There, can you see that? That's you guys out there fishing. Can you see that?
Oh, that's it. That was the episode that we shot.
That was, yeah, okay, that was it.
Yeah. Boy, I looked good back then, don't I, guys?
Oh, young stud.
That was a good deal.
Yeah. What else we got, Mike? Has Roland ever been freshwater salmon fishing?
There's some, yeah. You know, we get them, up in the Great Lakes, all the salmon, sure. Yeah. I've caught salmon in all the Great Lakes,
Yeah. How do you rate them? How do you rate salmon in terms of sport fishing? How do you rate that experience?
Well, if you're just along to reel them in, you haven't learned much, you haven't done much. But if you're a captain and you're looking at the depth finder and you're trying to make the decision on what lure to use and what size leader to use and how much weight and what speed to use, and looking at your depth finder and find the right contour, if you're putting all that together, it's a challenge. and it's fun. But if all you're doing is just got a guide trip and you're just reeling in the salmon, that rates nothing. I mean, that in other words, so often people say, "Oh yeah, I went salmon fishing. We caught 30 salmon." I said, "Well, who ran the boat?" "Well, I don't know. The other guy ran the boat." All they did was reel them in. That's not. Salmon fishing's fun, but you got to get involved in the nitty gritty of it, not just reeling them in.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because one of the things that most people that charter a boat, one of the things that they miss out on is exactly that. Yes, it's fun to catch fish. Yes, when the captain yells, fish on, everybody's running for the rod and all that. But you're absolutely right. I think some of the best experiences of chartering a boat for the day is hanging around with the captain shoulder to shoulder, watching what he's doing and reading along with him and asking him. And that's the key, because if you don't ask, most of these guys won't volunteer. But asking him what he's looking for and what that you could use yourself.
It's a very technical thing, and it's a lot of fun to figure it all out.
Yeah.
But if all you do is reel them in, that's not figuring anything out. That's
There you go. There's some smallies.
There's the good ones.
And that was from that trip that we talked about. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Another one, guys, that speaking of the trolling there very quickly on the Lake Ontario thing that I didn't realize. My buddy, my buddy Sean Hans that does it all the time. They buy that Fish Hawk speed pen. And the reason that they run that is because the baits are literally running at a different speed than the boat when they're down there 50, 60, 70 feet of water with the different currents and stuff like that. Believe it or not, that bait is not pulling at the same speed as the boat. So that Fish Hawk tells you the speed of the lure. And if that fish wanted at 2.3 miles an hour or 1.7 mile an hour, they dial it down with the bait speed and not the boat speed. I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. Lake Ontario, all these lakes.
With the wind, we know we have the top currents going one way and the bottom currents are going the other way because
exactly
the water moves to the north has to come back to the south. So
yeah. So stuff like that you learn from a charter captain, right? So
I remember a story that my brother Reno shared with me one time. He had fished against you in a tournament on the Hudson River, and I only bring this up because you guys are talking about speed and water current and stuff, and you won that tournament, or I'm sure you won it, or came very close to winning it, and it was because you figured out the tidal movement on this river, and you were running like half a day to your spot, but being there at the right time when the tide was just at the right height. Tell us about that story because it's fascinating.
Well, everything was good. I was fishing out of Catskill, New York, and I was running down to West Point, practically.
Yes.
Newburgh. Almost to Newburgh. A bunch of old pilings, a bunch of piers and stuff. And all through the warm-up days, the fish were biting, they were just biting on crankbaits or biting on big jigs and biting on spinnerbaits. Well, the tide is 5 foot. You got a 5 foot tide. So when you get there in a low tide, the pilings are out of the water. They're just in the mud. I mean, there's no fish there anywhere. But when on a high tide, the fish, they're 5 feet deep and the fish have moved in. And then, so what was the good time to fish was when the milfoil would finally get flooded to the point each of the milfoil stalks came up about 2 feet, where it had just a little curl to the top. In other words, it had come up almost to the height of the top of the milfoil. When it got to that level, they were in there. They just followed right in. They were at the edge of the grass, edge of the pilings, and they were hitting spinnerbaits. And again, on the pilings, they would hit crankbaits. But anyway, the deal was it's just an hour window, maybe an hour window. First day, I led the tournament. Second day, I led the tournament, but it was way late, 10 o'clock at catching them. Finally, 11 o'clock. And so finally, the last day of the tournament, 3-day tournament, the tide says it wouldn't be right till 11:30. And so I told my partner, I said, we'll have to just fool around and do something else. But at 11:30, we'll have to be on those pilings at Newburgh, and I can win the tournament there, when they come in and bite. We got there at 11 o'clock, nothing. They only hit 1 or 2 little fish in the Livewell. Finally, at 11:30 came. Well, the wind blew funny. And you know how it is, Pete. When the wind blows, it'll hold the tide back or something will happen. And that's what happened. The tide didn't come in because the wind shifted and it was just holding the water back, and it was still too low. And so finally it got to be 11:45. And I only had to get in about 2 o'clock. We were an hour south anyhow. So the partner said, we only have an hour or so to fish. I said, I know. They're going to be here. He says, man, we can't wait any longer. We have to wait 11:45. We're going to have to leave. And so I said, no. I know they're going to come in. I know. So finally, he's like pulling on the trolling motor, and he is saying, we're going to leave. We've been here 3 hours, and we haven't caught a single but one little teeny fish. I said, this isn't going to work. We're going to go find something else. It's like terrible. I'm leading the tournament. I'm number one at that point. Well, finally, at exactly 15 minutes to 12, I fire my cast with a big spinnerbait, that big old Roland Martin big bass spinnerbait by Blue Fox. Anyway, I fired it in by where the grass and the logs are all there. Bam! 5.5 pounds. Ooh, he said, that's a big one. Look at that big giant bass. It's like maybe the big fish of the tournament. Then on the next cast or the 2 casts later, I catch one 6.25 pounds, which is a big fish. Won a boat as well. Now I'm leading the tournament now. I got over 11 pounds of bass. The 3rd cast or 4th cast, anyway, to make a long story short, 5 minutes of 12, I had 25 pounds something of bass. 5 bass that weighed 25 pounds. Of course, that I was already ahead of the tournament, so I'd won the tournament. And I knew I'd won the tournament. The problem is I'm an hour and something south, and now I'm ready back by 2 o'clock. So I told my partner, I said, I kind of tricked them. I said, this is a pretty good spot. I said, but I got a better spot. I said, Socrates, there's the big barge, and we can go catch a couple big bass up there. And it's really a good spot, but it's only like 20 minutes from where I had to go, So he says, okay. Well, he hadn't caught one. He didn't have the right spinnerbait. He wasn't throwing the right deal. Out of all those monster bass I caught, he didn't catch a single one of them. So we get up to the barge at Socrates, and I'm kind of thinking, I hope we catch one, because I really want to get back to the weigh-in, and I was just kind of kidding him. So I did throw in, and I caught about a 4 or 5 pounder. So that actually did help a little bit. And then he caught a couple. So anyway, it was time to leave, and it was time to get back to the weigh-in, and so of course I won the tournament. But it was a close call. If you can only go on a pattern so long, and at a certain point, patterns just don't pay off. I mean, and it wasn't a for sure thing that pattern there was going to pay off. It was, not all the time will it pay off. So it was again.
So was that guy a non-boater though, or Roland? Like, was your the backbone?
That was a regular draw tournament on that particular one. That was like 1980 something or other. And
okay,
he actually, how it works, you fish half a day in your water and half a day in stuff. My argument was that hell, I'm leading the tournament. I mean, I'm
right,
and he wants to take his half day. I said, I don't think that's going to work. I said, that's not right.
You know what's funny about every tournament that I can remember ever being involved with, there's always that major story. And in the tournament that you just talked about on the Hudson, it was Roland being able to read the tides. That was the underlying message that quickly spread out in the fishing community. And every tournament has got that. And at the time, you're not even thinking anything of it. You're just doing your job and you're figuring stuff out. But it's how quickly, I say quickly, in the matter of the next 2 weeks after that event, word gets out that tide, fish the tide, figure out the tides, run to the tides, wait until the tide, that's how big those things are, right?
But another thing about the tide, once you figure out the right, like an incoming tide was the bite. And I had that same, like I went to that Socrates barge, the same, that was like an hour later. But see, it moves later to going north. As you go north, the tide's an hour later, say, so you can duplicate that same tide when it's really the right flood condition in 2 or 3 places. You could run all the way to Albany and still maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon find that same flood tide, 4 hours after you'd caught them down in Newburgh, which is a long run. But the point is, You can
Yeah.
duplicate the tide as you run north.
How important have the whole tournament thing, how important has it been to fishing in general, in your opinion? In other words, if we eliminated all tournaments from back in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000s, do you think we'd be where we are today in terms of our fishery?
Well, of course, all the different lures that have come out of tournament competition, all the drop shotting techniques and all the special jerk baits and all the special lures that everybody's invented and come up with, that's a big part of it. Just the equipment in general, as tournament anglers, we've wanted better GPS units. We've wanted better depth finders, and the regular Mark, I don't think the regular Joe Blow fisherman would have wanted that, or even cared so much about down scan and side scan and those kind of really nifty kind of sonar deals. I don't think that would have happened unless the tournament guys had been demanding it. And then they show guys like Wheeler, Jacob Wheeler, who's a good friend of mine. He's like the #1 fisherman right now in the country, and he's such an expert with down scan and side scan. But without him showing people how to do it, the average guy might miss the boat on that. I think it takes the tournament angler and showing the success, and actually on television, like we've done for many years, show the hottest new techniques. And that's another thing. We've all been involved with dissemination of information, and that's been the whole key to my success. We're all just trying to tell everybody how to catch fish. Right. And so our whole career, we're trying to have them catch fish and help people all the time. And the tournament angler has been able to do that. He's shown through trial and error and through the success of his tournament that there's a better way to fish. You watch me and I'll win the tournament, but I'll help you as well. So, and yeah, tournaments have been tremendous.
You know what? I'm gonna just go kind of back what Roland was talking about there. These fishermen, especially you see these tournament anglers out nowadays, and you're thinking that they're making all their money by casting and reeling, but that's not the case. They know their electronics so well, but the only reason they know them so well is they sit there and just use their electronics. They sit there and learn everything about that side finding Roland's talking about, the down scanning that Roland's talking about. And they'll sit for hours pre-fishing the tournament with their rigs. They won't even be casting for like the Tennessee River system and all that. They'll just go looking for schools of fish, shell beds. They'll look for bait. They look for everything like that. They learn. I mean, they've learned throughout the years, but they keep learning and keep using that electronics first, and then they start fishing them. I mean, the problem with the average angler, I think, and even with me, I do it a lot of times, is I want to get casting. I want to get out there and get casting and catch a fish and all that stuff. But it's not necessarily the right thing to do. Learn your electronics first, and then to learn them well, and then it'll tell you where to fish, and it's sort of these little intricate details. So it's a huge key. You got to learn.
My son Scott is the perfect example of that. I've been with him on Kentucky Lake, for example, where he's maybe for the whole morning not made a single cast.
Right.
That's Scott right now.
Scott.
Don't tell him.
I got a phone call. This just came. It was a California. It sounded like it wasn't a good call.
Don't worry.
But Scott, he'll go a half day sometime without making a cast.
That's right. He trusts his electronic. I mean, I've watched Scott's YouTube stuff on his Garmin stuff, and it's amazing what he does with that, and he reads it well, and he trusts it, 100% trusts it. Right?
He's way better than I am. I can get into his boat after he's got it all adjusted, and I can show you where the fish are. But my problem is to get it all adjusted in the first place.
Right.
I'm just on my own, and Scott says, "Okay, Dad, take my boat out, get it all set up, and go find some fish." I can't do it. He's got to set it up and really get it all adjusted just exactly right.
Yep.
Before I can really do it.
Yep. It's true.
It's funny. It's hard. I mean, it's difficult.
I think what a lot of people fail to understand, and God bless the average angler, but the average angler thinks that people that are in the business like we are, we're born with this innate gift from God that made us fishermen or something, you know, and it's not. We learn, and I, having spent a lot of time with both of you guys, who I think are two of the top anglers that I've ever been associated with, I've spent enough time with you guys to know that the biggest part of the process is trial and error. And if you aren't learning on days where you're not catching fish, you're not fishing. And that's the key. It's not the days where the fish are jumping on your bait every time you throw something out there. It's the days where they're not. That's where you learn. That's where you get to spend the time, and that whole trial and error thing. And I think really good anglers like yourself, Roland, I think your key to your success is your ability to retain that information. That computer chip that you've got in your brain that allows you to access information immediately from 25, 35, 40 years ago, where you were in that same situation, and all of a sudden, hey, black spinnerbait, yes, noon, high, clouds, black spinnerbait, because you're able to recall. And I think that's the biggest difference.
You know,
I want that on an SD card, by the way. Okay, I want Roland's computer chip on an SD card. I can just plug it in my head. I'm gonna have it for the rest of my life.
well, it's all because of my pattern approach to fishing. You know, I've written books on how to establish a pattern, and I'm always looking at water and cover conditions and the temperature and the currents and stuff. So I've been kind of pretty scientific as far as trying to figure out the conditions, you know. And of course, we all know that water temperatures and water clarities are just paramount to about everything we do, as well as moon phases, as well as wind directions, as well as a million other things. But that's the kind of pattern approach that I use. I, you know, put together what seems to be an impossible puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at a pattern and you say, okay, there's fish biting over here off that point, and you look at all the conditions there, and basically go to this other point and catch them, and they're the same conditions. You got the same conditions. You know, that's all you have to do. You have to identify every little thing that's there. What kind of bottom is it? What kind of wind direction? What kind of water temperature? I mean, you just have to be really paying attention. It's just pattern.
Which brings me to, and I'm sorry if I'm skipping over these, but there's one that just dovetails into what you're just saying. It's a question by Dave Krowski, I guess it is. And he says, when you have to work, there you go. When you have to work and you only get to go fishing on planned outings, it's meaning you just don't have the time to put into it, right? It's great to be able to have TV programs that you can refer to, because that's what we do. We put in the time. So the difference between us and most of you watching this today is the fact that we've been blessed with the opportunity to do this for a living. We've been very fortunate, right place, right time, etc. So we spend a lot of time doing it. And what we try and do each week on our programs and through our digital initiatives that we all have is to try and eliminate that work and effort for you by being able to zone it down. And Roland just mentioned the word pattern. That's probably the most important part that we can help you. The pattern and location are the two things that we can help you with when you don't have a lot of time to go out and figure it out for yourself. However, having said that, what Roland just said, he just said something there, and I hope everybody clued in on what he said and burn it into your psyche. And that is, if the fish are biting on that point, because the wind is just coming in a certain direction and the temperature's there and whatever other elements are involved in that particular pattern, take that and replicate it someplace else, because the fish probably will be doing exactly the same thing, given that the elements and conditions are identical. So that's
in Wikipedia, I looked at it this morning. There's a quote on Wikipedia for Roland Martin. It says, he popularized the concept of pattern fishing, determining a particular way to catch a fish for a given time and lake, and then applying it to similar locations around that lake. That's the guy right there.
Well, it works only for bass. It works for everything. You know, every the fish has its parameters.
Yeah. Another good thing. Another good thing as a tip for people that want to learn. I know you look at the Roland, Ange, and I, and all the TV guys and all that out there, and tournament guys out there. That's one source of information. But if you can hire a fishing guide, a good quality fishing guide, they will teach you so much. They're the unsung heroes of this thing, and they'll want to teach you because basically they're out there they're almost babysitting sometimes out there. And if you can go over the guy, go ahead.
I tried a little teeny bit. I guided a guy this last week, and he was making a classic. Let me tell you what he was doing. You can understand it. He's using spinning tackle. He'd take his spinning rod and put it back over his shoulder, and he'd look at the target at the last minute with in the stationary position and go, oh. Well, you know, that's not accurate. Number one, you're not loading the rod. You're not getting much. You're just slinging the lure. I mean, to get the most out of the rod, you have to take it back and forward and load the rod.
Yeah.
By taking it back and forward in the right manner, it's a perpendicular kind of approach. You get more accuracy. He was just taking it like this and slinging it about a 45 degree. He had no accuracy and no distance. And I spent a half a day getting him squared away. And I got him where he was casting good. I found where he was casting good. He was real powerful, and he could set the hook, and so that wasn't a problem. And he could reel pretty good, and he had a pretty good otherwise he was all right. It's just that his casting was just horrible. And unless you go with a pro, like we could straighten them out, of course, or a guide could straighten them out. But a lot of people get in some terrible bad habits, and they don't know how to break them, and then nobody ever tells them that they're doing these things wrong. And when I fish with people, I say, listen, I'm going to be constructively critical. And I might even make you mad, but I'm going to tell you, if you're doing something wrong, I'm going to tell you, and I want to try to help you. So
no difference between Roland Martin and golfing with Tiger Woods. If you can get a hint from Tiger or two, he's going to teach you the right stuff, right? It's consistency, time, and knowledge.
That's important. Yeah.
Wally Courier wants to know on the subject of scents and scented baits. Do they time out as far as effectiveness goes? Is there a best before date that should be attached to the package? That's a great.
Wow. I wonder about that. I got some old stuff. I got some stuff that are a year or so old. I wonder.
I know that mega strike that we're at Angelo.
When you get it real old, it gets all kind of.
I know.
Brown looking. I don't know. It's
yeah,
not
but
that
I'll tell you what.
clear.
That mega strike though, when we run it, like sometimes we'll put it on our fall crankbaits. You put it on the fall crankbaits for walleye, and then it comes spring, you put the rods away for the winter. It comes spring, that stuff is still on there perfect. Like after 3 or 4 months, it's like, oh my god, I can still use this stuff. So it hangs on good, and it still smells right. So I don't know what kind of expiry it has on it, but.
Outdoorsy Gal wants to know, can someone please print out the ethical fishing, not fishing bass on their beds? Especially when gobies are in that lake. So, Roland, this might not necessarily apply to you.
I got a good question about spawning. If he has a moral issue about spawning, then whatever happens, he should not fish April, May, or June. He should stay home.
By the way, it's not a he. This is Outdoorsy Gal.
A lot of times when they said, well, I'm going to catch him off the bed, bad. But you're always catching them off the bed. You might not know they're on the bed. You might be in the middle of Lake Ontario in 15 feet of water just casting whatever. They might be on a bed, probably are on a bed. That's why they're biting. So, I mean, get off the high horse and say, don't fish bedding fish, because if it's a catch and release program, it doesn't make any difference.
Mm-hmm. Well, what she's referring to, we have a problem up here. We have about 10, 12 years ago, gobies started appearing in the Great Lakes, and they were an invasive species. And these fish are prolific spawners. I'm talking gobies. But more importantly, they hang around right on the bottom of whatever that substrate is. And they do a great job of cleaning up bass nests. I mean, that's what they live on. That's why they've grown so quickly. So here, what we have here is a situation where if that bass is pulled off the nest, even for a split second, the gobies, you can literally see, we've taped it on camera. You can literally see a pack of gobies moving in on those eggs. So we do have a problem here. It's not as cut and dry as what you just said. We do have a problem. And
by the same token, Angelo, all the goby infestations that you can point out will also have the benefit of having bigger fish now in the process. Every single one, there's an infestation of goby, and they're eating eggs and they're doing all this other stuff, but the fishing's better in the long run. Whether or not they eat 1 million eggs or not. The fishing's better, and the fish are better.
Yeah.
That's
We've
true.
got it. Go ahead, Pete. Sorry.
No, I'm saying that's true. I didn't realize that point. You know, when you look at because
Yeah.
they look at the any of the Great Lakes, Lake Simcoe, all our lakes around here are they're so prolific for gobies, and the bass are now they've never been this big as an average before, right? We're getting 6 pound, we're getting 8 pound smallmouth on lakes like Simcoe. Like,
Yeah.
that's
The problem
ridiculous.
with a lot of lakes is that there's just too many fish. If you have too many bass, you can't support a big, healthy, big bass population if there's 1 million bass. You might only be able to support a big bass population with 100,000 bass. So a lot of times, if there's too many bass, they're all small. To get trophy bass involved, you can't have just 1 million bass. You have to have the right number of bass, or you're not going to have trophy bass.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true too.
You know, it becomes more of an ethical thing, I think, in terms of that. We're blessed with such a vast fishery in this part of the world, and the window of opportunity is so small that, you know, there is an element out there that would say we should not fish bedding bass and just go fish something else at that time. And then there's the other element, like you just said, that, you know, not that we should go out and destroy bass beds at will, but sometimes thinning out the herd is not necessarily a bad thing. There's no scientific proof either way right now that can tell you one way or the other.
Limnology and pond management, all the great doctors of from Indiana State University, and I forgot all the Heidinger and all these guys. They've all said that to get a trophy fish population, you have to eliminate those small ones. You have to very actively take away the little bass. If you let all the little bass try to grow up, you're not going to have a fishery. You're not going to have a trophy fishery. The only way to get a trophy fishery is by eliminating a lot of those small ones. So that's and the other way, preserve the big fish, and the recruitment rate is so great for a big giant 6 or 7 pound smallmouth, might be 15 years, that if you keep them, you can't recruit them fast enough to make it work. So you have to have a catch and release on top of that for the big fish.
Yeah.
So a trophy lake has to have an element of catch and release, and then you have to thin the herd.
Yeah, and I mean, Southern Ontario, we don't get outdoorsy gal. We don't get a whole lot of opportunities to fish bedding fish either, as well, right? Our seasons are pretty much set up. I mean, it's changing now in Lake Ontario, and actually they're talking about changing that season, extending it 2 more weeks of non-fishing for bedding smallmouth. So we don't really have that opportunity like the Northern Ontario does or the U.S. So our fish are pretty much protected for the most part, seasonally. So
and I think, you know, the fact that we've got such a good fishery in Central Ontario, Central South Ontario for bass, I think that's a testament to that, because they're so heavily protected that when we do fish them, they're getting bigger. There's more of them. Anybody who says that fishing's not like it used to be, they're absolutely right, but they're not using it in its true context. Fishing is better today.
In the case of smallmouth, with zebra mussels and with the gobies, even though they're an invasive species, a lot of areas have benefited from those infestations.
absolutely.
Smallmouth fishery than ever.
Tim wants to know, and it's been up a few times, so I need to answer it. Tim Sturgeon, who's one of our regulars here, he wants to know what happened to the Three Legends company that was out a few years ago with you and Bill and Jimmy.
It's still kind of hanging in there. It's just, I don't know.
I can answer it. Can I answer it? Can I answer it?
Yeah.
Knowing the manager involved in this very well and having talked to him about it quite frequently, one of the problems with the Three Legends, conceptually, fantastic idea. I think when he told me about it, when Walt told me about it, I said, wow, that is brilliant. But one of the problems with you three is like it's like herding cats.
Yeah.
Try and get you three together on the same agenda at the same time is difficult to do.
Well, see, when you take Jimmy and Bill and I together and look at all the categories we have covered, there's not much left. Like we can't do a rod and reel because we all have different rods and reels. Can't do a certain lure because we all have different lures. So it kind of narrows it down to things like a fishing glove or a knife or a tackle box. And, you know, you get into some kind of small potato deal. It would have been nice if we could have had a Three Legends rod and reel, a Three Legends lure, but
The whole time.
it wasn't contractually possible.
No.
We couldn't do
Right.
it, you know.
There's some stories that Pete and I have been privileged to hear from behind the scenes, but there's some stories about the three of you that one that Jimmy tells all the time now is the one where the three of you were fishing together fairly recently. I'm saying in the last 3 or 4 years, and you hooked Billy in
Oh.
the head. Tell us about that, Roland.
Well, we were throwing popping cork is in a way of fishing a jig, particularly for sea trout. And we were fishing speckled sea trout, spotted sea trout in Florida. And we'd take a popping cork, which is a big float with kind of a concave front. And when you pop it real hard, it goes chug, chug. It makes a lot of noise, and the fish can hear it 8 or 10 feet away. And dangling down from it 4 or 5 feet is the jig. So it's going chug, chug, and the jig is under the water kind of hopping around. And so that's a good way to catch them. Well, the problem is in a small boat, it's hard to cast those kind of rigs. You know, you got a long rod and the thing's all dangling around. And so I hooked it. So I
In the head.
wanted to pull it out real quick because I knew that if you get hooked and you pull it out real quick, sometimes it doesn't hurt right away.
Yeah.
So as soon as it got hooked, it's kind of numb. I just grabbed it and tried to pull it out real fast, and it just opened the thing up, and he's bleeding all over.
Jimmy tells the story. You're chasing around. Let me get that out. Get away from me.
He's all mad. It was terrible.
There's so many of those great stories. I know when we've had the privilege of spending time with you on a boat, which we've been blessed several times to do, the stories that come out from those outings, and you know, it's fishing in general, and that's why we all love fishing. That opportunity to share moments that otherwise would never happen if it wasn't for being out there fishing, and that's really key, really important. I've been meaning to ask you two things, and I wrote them down here earlier on. You're in a rocking chair.
Oh,
What are you doing in a rocking chair?
let me look. Look, this is it says to Roland. What's it say? To Roland.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you read it. It says Roland from Johnny Morris. That's Johnny Morris. Old man rocking chair. See, there's my deer and a turkey and bass. And see, when we get together, if you can see the bottom, you can't see the bottom. That's a morel mushroom down here. Now, when I'm with Johnny Morris and we're up in the springtime in the Ozarks, and we're always hunting mushrooms, and these are morel mushrooms that are really good to eat. We're going out on some of Johnny Morris's big properties. It'll be guys like John Anderson, the singer, myself, and Martin Truex, the race driver. We're all out there wading in the swamps with hip boots on, and we're getting these morel mushrooms. If we get the morel mushrooms, Johnny is a real expert at cooking them up. And he'll clean them, and he'll salt them, and he'll just fry and saute them in butter. They are the best tasting mushroom in the world. And so Johnny, we're always trying to get Johnny, whenever I go out to the Midwest, I might be in Kansas or I might be in Iowa doing some other thing, and I'll find morel mushrooms, I'll send them to Johnny. One time I was with this pig farmer, and we were up in Illinois, and I asked this pig farmer, he said, oh yeah, we got all kind of morels along the Mississippi River. I said, well, can you send Johnny some? He said, sure, I can send him some. I got a whole bunch of them, and I just picked them. So he went home, and what he does, he sends artificial insemination. He does artificial insemination for the pigs. Mm-hmm. So he has boxes made up that handle it's the pig semen. The send for artificial insemination. It's it's perfect for mushrooms. I mean, it's just the right size box. It's not that there's any big semen in there. I mean, no. But anyway, he gets all these boxes up that are, it says, danger, all this stuff that's supposed to be in there, like pig semen. And then he sends all these mushrooms to Johnny Morris. getting boxes. Well, anyway,
That's hilarious.
it was hilarious. But Johnny knew what the deal was, and he went ahead. He said they were the best tasting mushrooms he ever had.
For people who might not, I don't know how this is possible, but let me just throw it out there. For people who might not know who Roland is referring to when he says Johnny or Johnny Morris, that of course is the owner of the Bass Pro Shop brand. A great man. I've had the privilege of meeting him a few times, and quite a storyteller in his own right. But where did he come along in all this journey? You know, so you talked to us about the late 60s, early 70s, and you guys were just starting, you and Bill Dance and Jimmy were just starting. Where did Johnny fit into all this?
Well, Johnny, when I first started tournament competition in 1970, I went to Toledo Bend, for example. Not one Toledo Bend, I'm sorry, Table Rock Reservoir. I met Johnny Morris in 1970, the first year that I fished the tournament trail. I met Johnny Morris. He had just graduated that year from Drury University in Springfield, Missouri, along with my other really good friend, Ronnie Curry. He was his roommate. So Ronnie and I and Johnny, we're all really big friends right now. But anyway, Johnny came on the tournament trail. I was successful and Bill Dance was successful. So Johnny started saying, he says, my dad has a chain of liquor stores. That's what he had at the time. Yeah. And so about the second or third year, he told me, he says, I'm going to open up these Bass Pro Shops in my daddy's liquor store. I said, well, what are you going to do? Because he had made the Classic in 71. He made the Classic in 72. I think he made the Classic 5 different years, Johnny Morris did, just fishing the tournaments along with Jimmy Houston and myself and Dance and all the top guys. Anyway, Johnny's right in there. He's catching a lot of fish. And so he says, Roland, I said, I'm going to open up a store in a fishing tackle deal in my father's liquor stores. He has 37 liquor stores all around Springfield. He's the largest liquor store guy around. And I'm going to put, worms in there and minnows and rods and reels and ice and beer and everything else that fishermen would want to have fishing. So anyway, that went along for about a year or so. Finally, he said, Roland, we're going to have a grand opening on this new store deal. He says, I was working for Lowrance Electronics at the time. He says, get a bunch of your electronics. We'll come over to Springfield. We'll do this big store opening. So I went to Darryl Lowrance at the time. I said, Johnny Morris is having this big store opening in his father's liquor store. We're going to sell depth finders and stuff, and it's really big deal. It's a liquor store. He said, I'm not going to let you do that. You can't go over there. So anyway, he wouldn't let me go over. So I called Don Butler, and he had a bunch of depth finders. And so I went sneaking over against Darryl's better judgment. And I had some depth finders that I bought from Don Butler. And we sold 37 depth finders in that grand opening that we had. The thing that was so precious that came out of that grand opening was Johnny had bought a bunch of Fenwick rods. It was a big rod company back then. And these were old models, and half of them were out of stock, and half of them were discontinued models, and maybe even a second or two. And so what he did, he had them all piled up, and he says, special on Fenwick rods, one per customer, lost leader, one per customer, $9.95 for one rod. Well, we're walking around the store, and everybody's grabbing a rod. He said, you only have one. That's the only one I can afford. Well, his father comes walking up that owns all these liquor stores. And he looks at Johnny and looks at this sale of $9.95 for a nice rod that are normally $30 or $40. And so he says to Johnny, he says, son, he says, how much did that rod cost you that you're selling for $9.99? And he looked at the tag and he had a little code on it. He said, this one cost me about $10.50. I said, what? He says, you're selling the thing cheaper than what you bought it for. He says, yeah, Dad. He says, in college, he says, we studied this concept of marketing called a lost leader. And you get them in, just get them one good benefit of a rod. And these are old stock rods anyhow, and they'll buy all these other things, and it's just working out great. We're doing thousands of dollars with the business today. Johnny looked at Johnny. He said, son, I think I've wasted a lot of money sending you to college. He says, I'm going to tell you one thing. You'll never make it as a retailer. What? Said, you'll never make it as a retailer.
The first time I met Johnny, he told me that same story, and it's true. And it's stuck with him.
Retailer in the world. There's not been a sporting good retailer ever that matched Johnny's ability, you know.
No,
But the cross breeding thing, his father couldn't figure that out. You'll
And-
never
and-
get a retailer.
Not only a great retailer, but instrumental in shaping the industry that we work in today, without question. You know, I'm listening to you talking, you're dropping these names, and people watching this might say, "Boy, Roland's a real name dropper," but that's who he grew up with. That's what that industry was. All of these names that we're hearing made the industry. And
actually, Roland, you've taken out presidents of the United States fishing, have you not? Tell us
Both
the
I
story.
fished with both Bush presidents. Yeah.
Any
You
good
gotta-
stories to that? Anything? Any good stories to tell the people about that? There's got to be
Oh
something.
yeah, holiday, all kind of crazy things. One of the really kind of funny things was I fished after fishing with George Senior, and we had a good time. We were on Ray Scott's Big Lake. His press secretary calls us up that one winter and said, "Would you and your wife want to come to the White House? We're having a state dinner for the president of Chile, who's a big. We're talking fishing contracts with international fishing contracts and stuff, and it's a state dinner." Well, anyway, I don't know anything about international contracts, but anyway, we went to the state dinner, and I sat next to Charleston Heston at the big table, and we're all dressed up in tuxedos and stuff. This is really a big time deal. And so Charleston Heston, he's at the time he's the president of the National Rifle Association.
right.
We'd gone through all these lines, and we'd met President Bush again, and we'd said hi. But we're sitting there eating a meal, and I'm asking Charleston Heston. I said, "Sir, I can't help but admire all the great work you do for the National Rifle Association, but do you fish?" And Charleston Heston said, "No, I don't fish. I love hunting, and I love guns, and I love the National Rifle Association, but no, I don't fish." So we get up to leave, and they have these honor guards, and these are high-ranking military officers. And this one was a lieutenant colonel, and he was set in a dress uniform. He was a Marine Corps lieutenant colonel, all dressed up in the finest of his uniform. And he walks over to the table, and kind of it's breaking up, and he kind of walks over and he says, "Sir, may I have your autograph?" And Charleston Heston turns to the Marine Corps colonel. He says, I'm sorry, I don't give autographs. Not in a situation like this. I no." And the colonel said, "Oh, sir, I wasn't talking about you. I'm a fisherman, and I want Roland's autograph." Heston looked at me. He was mortified. He was just like,
That's hilarious.
That was awesome.
I remember you telling me the story when you were fishing with George Bush Senior. Junior.
Yeah.
Where you had security people all over the docks and the shoreline, and you're trying to get the camera to shoot without all these security people in the sea. That must have been hilarious.
I tell you, the funniest was when the President Bush Senior, we were at Ray Scott's Lake, and he gets hooked. He was taking a rattle trap in the ambassador reel, and he throws out and catches about a 3-pound nice little bass. And I said, Mr. President, can I help you? Can I help you? He said, no, I'll get it. Well, he grabs the thing and bam, he jumps, and the big hook gets him in the thumb. And I said, "Oh my God, Mr. President! Oh, let me call for some help. You're gonna have to get somebody to get that hook out." And he grabs a hold of me and he said, "Don't you mention it. Don't say anything." He says, "If anybody finds out I'm hooked," he said, "they'll send me off to some stupid hospital and then make a national issue out of it." And he says, "No," he says, "I don't want anybody to know I'm hooked. I want you to get those pliers down there, and I'm going to put my hand in the ice bucket. And when I tell you to, Roland, I want you to pull that hook out." President, he says, "If anybody knows that I'm hooked, it's going to be the end of the fishing trip. It's going to be a national deal, and we can't let anybody know that I've been hooked." So he gets down there in the floor of the boat, and there's a big ice chest down there full of Coca-Colas and stuff. So he puts his hand, President of the United States, he's on his hands and knees with his hand in the ice cooler. And everybody's looking. There's 2 or 3 security boats, and there's photographers on the bank, and there's people in trees and everything else. And they're all watching what's going on, and they got binoculars, and they don't really know what's going on. They can't tell that he's hooked. So In the meantime, he's just waiting for his hand to get numb, and he says, "Hey, you guys want some Cokes? Hey, Roland, you want a Coke?" And he's handing me, the president of the United States is on his knees, handing me a Coca-Cola. And everybody that's watching said, "What in the world is going?" I mean, why would that ever happen? This is crazy. So anyway, he finally gets his hand all numb, and he says, "Okay, Roland," he says, "when I stand up, I want you to grab that thing with those pliers. I want you to rip that hook out, and then I'm going to turn around the other way, pretend like nothing happened. And we're going to keep fishing." So he stands up. I take those pliers, grab the hook, just pull him right out. He turns around the other way. He goes back to the ice chest, kind of gets a little bit of blood and stuff, and he picks up a rod. And he starts. Nobody ever knew that the president of the United States was hooked.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Story, man. It's funny. People don't think that, especially individuals in high power like a president. People don't even think of them as being regular folks. They love fishing, as most people do. And
the thing I really enjoyed about fishing with him was he was like a sponge. He, like all these guys that are asking us questions right now, he was asking the same kind of questions. Just like, what's the biggest fish you ever caught, or what's your favorite lure? All these things, just like we're answering today to these guys. The president of the United States is asking me those same kind of questions because he wants to know. He's just inquisitive. He's a fisherman. That's what fishermen do.
That's the beauty. That's the beauty of fishing right there. Exactly. What's that one?
Backcountry Angling says, amazing story. That's the beauty of pinching back barbs. If we didn't have barbs, obviously it wouldn't be quite as hard to rip something out of a person's head. Yeah, you wouldn't have a president story for sure. I mentioned about an hour ago, by the way, that there was one story I want to share with folks about Roland Martin putting on the ultimate bass fishing clinic.
Okay.
And it has to do with an episode we shot together, Roland. You may recall on the French River, we were doing a boot camp for a bunch of corporate people. And part of what you and I and Pete were responsible for is taking these folks out and fishing them and showing them how to fish and all that stuff. Yeah. And Pete alluded to this a couple of weeks ago, or even last week when we were doing about when Pete and I get out with people in a situation like that where it's a group environment. We're all about having fun like everybody else, and we'll be up all night with them, shoulder to shoulder. But we'll be up first thing in the morning, getting them all up and making sure that they fish hard all day. And that was what happened in that particular one that I'm talking about, because we had been up all night with these guys, and we'd had a great time, and there was a lot of booze involved and all that stuff. And we got
Ray Arms, and Ray Arms,
yeah.
Oh man, we had a good time.
Remember that?
Yeah.
So anyway, we got up the next morning with a couple of hours sleep, and we were hurt puppies for sure. And I remember we cruised into that little back bay, and there was about 5 or 6 other boats of guests that were in our group that had all come along to try and pick up some knowledge. Little did they know how badly we were actually feeling. But I remember cruising into that little back bay, and Roland, you said, what are we going to fish? Where should we fish out here? Or something along those lines. And you said also, have you got a bass rod on board? And somebody said, no, but we got a musky rod. That'll do. How big? Oh, it's a big old musky rod with a great big reel. That's okay. That's all right. And now the boats are gathering because they want to see what Roland is going to do here in this nondescript little back bay that had nothing. There was nothing there. But we had pulled in, I think, because the lake was rough, and we pulled into the back here. Anyways, so Roland gets this big old musky rod out, and it's got real heavy line on it, big kinky heavy line. And he ties on little wee tiny worm hook and puts on a Senko, and he proceeds. He got up. First of all, he made a couple of casts, and he learned something real quick. And he learned that there was a small clump of weeds just about as far as he could cast with that big old stiff musky rod with hardly any weight on it, because he wanted to float this worm in there. And he found that was, after a couple of casts, that he was just hitting the fringe part of that little weed bed. And he turns to me, he says, I'm going to catch a fish with that. I'm thinking, are you serious? It's a muskrat. You got 20-pound test monofilament line, for God's sakes. What are you going to do with that? He says, yeah, it's not going to catch. I said, I don't think you're going to catch a damn thing. Meanwhile, all the boats have surrounded us, ready for Roland to put on this great exhibition of fishing skills.
We
Says,
caught
yeah. Remember that? And you said,
caught quite a few. Yeah.
he says, I'm going to make 10 casts and I'm going to catch 10 bass. Remember that? And I said, oh, I'm not. And Roy Arms, who was at the back of the boat, he starts laughing. He says, I'll take a piece of that action. Anyways, we got this great. I hope we got it queued up, Mike. If it is, just let it play.
It seems on 6 look at that phase. Roland finally jumps to action and hops to the bow of the boat.
He says you can get 10 out of 10.
This guy sees fish like no other. Time to have a bit of fun.
Mr. Martin is about to put on a clinic.
Okay, 0 for 1. I'm counting now, Roland.
Nice one. What do you figure he's going to go out of 10? Let's bet it. Come on, buddy. Pressure's on you now. Did it too. 3 for 5. Now we're talking. Oh boy. Oh, ooh, that's the one Roland wanted. Uh-oh. Anyways, what is he now?
4 for 6.
4 for 6. And I'm saying he could go 6 for 10. Roy's got 7 for 10. Oh, I saw that! Mark her down, brother. Mark her down. 4 for 8. He's got 2 to go. Oh, I know what he's doing. I know exactly what he's doing. He's not setting the hook anymore. He's just dragging into him. 5 for 9. I got great confidence. I could have said 50-50. So that's 6 for 10. It was a valiant effort. I must say, you did a great job. I just won myself 5 of something, either pesos or Canadian dollars. I'm not sure yet.
I'll get a cut out of this, right?
Yeah, you're getting half. Are you kidding me? I told you. I whispered that in your ear.
It was just a great moment in my life to have sat there and experienced that, because it was incredible. And there was only one other fish caught in that whole bay of boats fishing. There was only one other fish caught, and yet Roland, out of nowhere, gets 10, or I think you had a total of 12 fish that actually took your bait, and those were all consecutive casts. It's fantastic, and that's all about committing to the cause, my friend.
Oh yeah. Well, you know what? When you're that good, like Roland's never the guy to say he's that good, but I'm telling you what, when you're that good, folks, you're that good. That right there shows it. That on that same trip or another one, I have the claim to fame of guiding Roland Martin. So one day, Roland was going to shoot with Roy, and my job was to take him to Wigwam Bay, and I'm just going to be in the back of the boat with a remote control, and I'm going to guide him along. Well, that's all I had to do. Basically, I got into the bay. I looked, and Roland goes, okay, them big pads back there, that big roll pad, we're going to go throw frogs in that pads, and then we're going to hit the reeds out here. And he did exactly that. I went in there, started throwing the frog in the pads. He got a couple fish who didn't like it. Pete, let's get out of here. Let's go. I take him over to the reeds. He starts, and the best part of this part was, so Roland starts catching fish instantly in the reeds. And Roy is struggling like hell. And then Roland's catching more in the reeds, and Roy is struggling like hell. So Roland secretly is looking back at me saying, what am I going to do here? What am I going to do to get Roy? And I'm saying to Roland, I'm just the guide here. You got to figure this thing. So the best part of that whole trip, I mean, I love the fact that I can say I guided Roland Martin. That's going to go down in history for me. But the best part was, he says to me, he says, I'm just going to cast out in the middle of nowhere like that. So he gives Roy, he says, Roy, right beside those pads, beside the reeds, right there, it's guaranteed there's a fish. Roy would struggle to get his cast out there to begin with, and then Roland would just fire his cast out in the middle of nowhere. He catches a 3-pound bass in the middle of nowhere. Roy still couldn't catch a fish. So Roland would catch him. Wherever he was casting, he was catching fish. It was ridiculous. It was like a fishing god.
Roy ended up catching a couple.
He got a couple. Yeah, he did. He ended up catching a couple.
You let him sneak in 1 or 2.
Oh my God, it was just unreal.
This is a pretty good time to bring in this next subject that I've been writing about, and I'm going to put it out as a blog very soon. I'm a couple of days away, but it's about confidence. And the thing that and hopefully you'll back me up on this, Roland. Yes, you need the tools, and you need the skills, and you need the conditions, and you need the perfect, storm, and you need the planets to align and the stars. You need all of that, all of it. But if you don't have confidence, if you don't know that every single cast you make, you're going to catch a fish, you're not going to catch fish. And there's nobody more confident than you. Talk to us about that.
Well, I'm confident to the point, but sometimes when the conditions are all wrong and I got the wrong lure and the water conditions are wrong, I'm going to lay my rod down and say, well, we don't have the right conditions. We got to get out of here. It's not that I don't want to fish. Not that I don't. I just know that for that spot, it's not that I don't have confidence in that I can't catch a fish. It's just that we're in the wrong spot. We got to go to another spot.
But I've never seen anybody more confident. And the story Pete just told us there, that's a perfect example. I watched you. I've been with you long enough to know that given the circumstances, before you make that cast, you already know. You're going to catch a fish, and usually you do. And that's the difference between most anglers, is the level of confidence in their ability. And that only comes from years of doing what you do. I mean, that's the only way you get that kind of confidence.
But a lot of professional athletes will have that attitude. I talked to Tom Watson, the golfer, and I was talking to him about confidence like that. And he said, Roland, he says, when I go to putt a ball and say it's almost a winning putt kind of a thing, he says, I convince myself I'm going to make the shot. He says, I visualize that ball going in a perfect shot. And he says, and he says, I have that confidence that I'm going to make that perfect shot. Now he might not, but he visualizes it actually happening, and he can see it happening.
Yeah. And he's got the skills. He
really plays that game. It's a mental game that he plays.
Yeah. That's a great example. A guy like Tom Watson, he knows he's made hundreds of 12-footers, and he's made a number of them for the championship. And so he's got the skills. All he has to do is get the confidence, the head going around it. It makes sense.
Roland, favorite fish to fish for? What would that be?
Well, for a long time, back about 20 or 30 years ago, when I was a lot stronger and more physically fit, I thought the tarpon was the ultimate in all fish because it's big and giant, 100 pounds or so, and it's just really hard to catch. But I've kind of changed my mind about the tarpon because I tell you what's changed. It was the YouTube that's changed my mind. I've gone out on a couple occasions in the last 2 or 3 years and caught a tarpon or two and put it on YouTube, and guess what?
Nobody wants
it. They look at that thing and say, "What? I don't care about a 100-pound tarpon. I want to see you catch a 3-pound bass." And I'll go out the next week and catch a 3-pound bass and have 10 times more people raving about the 3-pound bass I caught than this big 100-pound trophy tarpon.
Wow.
And so it's a matter of, like Bass Pro Shop, Johnny Morris calls it the right thing. Bass is the king fish. I don't care if it's a walleye. I don't care if it's a salmon. I don't care if it's a trout. Bass is still the world's #1 fish. I mean, as far as the number of people that fish for it, and it supports the biggest amount of tackle. When you think of all the lures that are available, if you look at all the bass lures, they outnumber every other kind of lure in the world for every other kind of fish ever. I mean, there's just more bass lures, period. And it's more of more tackle, more different kinds of rods and reels. So if you look at the whole setup, Johnny's pretty smart. You can sell them a boat, not only just a bass boat. You can sell them a canoe. You can sell them a kayak while you're at it. You sell them all kind of stuff. And about 10 different rods and reels. You take a trout fisherman with that one fly rod, he's going to have a handful of trout flies and maybe a set of waders, and that's $1,000 deal versus a $100,000 deal. So, there's more everything involved with bass fishing.
I wrote an article that's on fishingcanada.com. I think we published it about a year ago. and it's titled Bass, the Money Fish. And I spent about a month researching for this piece, and I came up with some really interesting stats. And it goes with the story or the comment you just made, and that in Canada, that particular year, and I think it was 2017, if I'm not mistaken, that the study was from, every bass caught and kept, because the research was based on bass caught and bass released. But every bass that was caught and kept cost $620.
Woo.
And it might have even been per fillet.
Nice.
But the average bass caught in Canada that year was just a little over $300. Those are all bass, catch and released. $300.
No kidding, eh?
Bass angler. So it truly is the money fish. There's no question about it. If you factor in the U.S., I think it's even stronger than it is here in Canada for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, panfish have a big following, and catfish have a following, and trout have a following, walleyes have a big following. But you take the walleye. As much as we like walleye, you love walleye as much as I do.
Yeah.
But there's only a handful of places to catch them worldwide.
Yeah. We have all of them here in Canada. Thank you.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of which, Roland, what you fish bass in Canada? I'm assuming. Is there a lake in particular in Canada, a Canadian lake that you would highly recommend, or your favorite bass lake in Canada that you've?
Well, for a long time, I thought Lake of the Woods was awfully good because I enjoyed doing some muskie, and of course there's some good walleye there, and it's always smallmouth. So it was kind of an all around thing. I'd go, well, I had a big deal with Rapala and Normark. They had a big houseboat up there called Lord Rapala, and Ray, one of the owners, had it up on this Oak Island on the Lake of the Woods, and so this guy Larry Anderson, he would he'd call me. Okay, the bass are really good. I can come over there. I can do 2 or 3 things. And see, Rapala wanted me to catch walleye because that's a huge part of their business.
Yeah.
And catch pike. Pike is probably the money fish for them because it cuts all their lures off. $10 Rapalas, just snip them off all right and left.
Yeah.
And of course, the bass were a great deal. So I'd go up there, and I used to spend a couple weeks fishing Lake of the Woods, getting several films for my TV show, particularly when I had that Normark contract.
Okay. Lake of the Woods is a dandy.
But a lot of muskie. We caught a lot of nice muskie.
Oh yeah, that lake is probably the best all-around lake in Canada for all multi-species fishing. Lake of the Woods. You have
so back in the Northwest Angle, there's some good largemouth that people don't even know about.
That's right.
It's pretty
right.
cool.
This one's going to be an easy one. Ron wants to know, what fish do you guys like to eat the most?
Well, Roland might be different than us. He might have a different.
There's a fish in Florida that the skin divers get, and you can catch them too with shrimp, called a hogfish. It's a hog snapper. It's ugly. It's got a big old hump on its top, and it's all nasty looking. That's the best of the big restaurants in the Florida Keys. If you want the #1 fish to eat, hog snapper. I guarantee it. #1.
Wow.
Snapper.
How does it compare, though, to a Northern Ontario shore lunch feast of walleye?
Yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, the walleye. Shore lunches are pretty good. Yeah. That, and really, when you think of the Canadian experience, if I were going to say what's neat about a Canadian fishing trip, it's a shore lunch is part of it. That's so precious to have that. Unfortunately, we don't have those kind of situations down here in the South. We don't have places for shore lunch. #1, we don't have the species of fish that we fish for, like the bass. For the most part, it's catch and release. So we don't have shore lunches, and I truly miss that. Your shore lunch is an experience that everybody needs to have.
It is so uniquely Canadian, and in particular Ontario. It's so unique because not only do we have this great base to start with, and that is walleye, which are, to my opinion, the tastiest freshwater fish on the planet. And not only that, but we have this whole host of characters out there that prepare a shore lunch. And preparation of that shore lunch is all part of that experience.
I really miss that. I really miss that about U.S. fishing. They're just not anywhere in the U.S. that you can do a shore launch. Now on Lake Powell, hey, I get with Gary Yamamoto, and we'll get a houseboat. We'll get do a combination shore launch. We'll take a grill and put it out on a sandy beach, and we'll kind of do a shore launch there.
Cool.
But because we catch striped bass. The striped bass is a good one for sure. But it's not as good as the walleye. It's all right though. But it's kind of the closest thing we got for.
Is that hogfish, Roland? Is that a white flaky meat, or what is it like a?
No, striped bass is kind of coarse.
No, the hog.
It's good as
hog snapper. Sorry, or what? The hog.
Oh yeah, it's a white flaky meat. Yeah, very and very moist and tender. Yeah, it's a good. Snook is good. Snook, the
Snook is good too. George Cassidy wants to know: do you guys have a go-to rod and reel that you have with you at all times that you would never travel without?
Roland? I really don't, Angelo. I really don't because, I have a sinker rod. I have a whopper plopper rod. I got a flipping stick. I got a little spinning rod for Ned rigs. And so I have like the average day. I'll usually put 6 rods on one side of the boat and 6 rods on the other side of the boat. And each lake you'd have to Lake Okeechobee fish is different than I fish where else I fish. So I have 12 different rods and reels each time I go fishing. So I really don't have a favorite rod reel. I really don't. I don't have anything like that because everything's so specific. And that there's certain rods like a flipping stick. Yeah, it's a flipping stick. You're not going to cast a Cinco or you're not going to cast a little teeny plug on a flipping stick. It's a specific thing. So,
unless you're the legendary Roland Martin, then you could take a great big heavy old flipping stick with 20-pound monofilament and throw a unweighted Senko, 4-inch Senko out in the wind, by the way, and catch bass every time you throw it out.
It's always good. That's why I missed so many. That was the reason.
That's exactly it. I looked at that video. When I watched that video, that just to let people know, I saw that. I recognize that rod. That's an 8-foot swim bait rod, is what that is. And we use that on it. It's a light musky rod or a heavy pike rod. And that's what Roland was catching those bass. And you can see when he said the hook, you can see no flex at all on the tip, right? He's just giving like a log, like a board.
And I hope you don't mind me saying, Roland, okay, what impressed me most about that whole deal, I hope you don't mind because I'm in the same boat as you. We were out the night before till the wee hours of the morning.
Yeah.
We had a couple of hours sleep. And I remember seeing you at 4 o'clock, 4:15, and it was pouring rain and freezing cold at that time of the morning. And I remember you all bundled up just like I was. And I looked into your eyes and I knew that you'd rather be in bed right now, but you weren't. And we went out. And even in those conditions, feeling that way, that's why that day, that clinic that you put on to me, they weren't big fish by any means, but what you did in that short period of time in front of all those people, and a lot of those people I still have communication with, and all they talk about after all those years is, wow, the clinic that Roland put on that morning was just short of phenomenal, So it was everything. It was the whole deal was just magic. And I hope we can replicate that for many more years to come, my friend.
I know, it'd be nice. The closest thing I had to that, let me tell you a similar thing. I was invited up to, I was working with Winchester Ammunition, and I was invited up to the Broadmoor Hotel up in Colorado Springs. And they were doing a big trap and skeet shoot in this big giant deal, and it's just a sporting clay event. And I was up there to do a seminar. And I'm dressed up in a suit and tie, and I'm out in this big formal balcony, and there's about 300 or 400 people there, and there's a lake outside. And I'm going to show them how to pitch and flip a jig with a flipping stick. And that was my seminar talk. Well, I'd gone down that afternoon. I'd looked down off the little balcony overlooking the lake where I was going to do my seminar, and I saw a bass down there. So I had one located. And I didn't fish for him, of course. He's a nice big 3-pounder. And he was laying by this rock. He was kind of in the shade of this rock. And so anyway, that night, I turned to the crowd, and I'm just showing them how to tie the knot. I'm showing them how it's normal pitch and flip, and I'm doing all this stuff with the rod. And I said, now, folks, let me show you how to catch a bass. And I walked over to the veranda, and I'm 10 feet off the water. I made a perfect flip into that little deal, a couple of weeds there and a rock. the 3-pound bass hit. I jerked him right up on the balcony and right into the room. And I got the 3-pound bass in my hand. I see it now. As the people are like, it's a formal deal. It's like, everybody's drinking wine and everything else. And it's like a big meal. But anyway, that's pretty cool. They said, do it again. I said, no, I can't. I'm not, I wouldn't make a second cast. You don't.
That's where you throw down the mic after that and walk away.
That is awesome.
Roland, tell folks about your YouTube channel, and also how much time you're spending with it and how you're nurturing it and some of the great things that you've done. I want folks that haven't been there, I want them to go there and check it out, because I've had the opportunity to spend quite a bit of time on it. And
now, folks, first of all, these guys, Angelo's company, does my editing on my television show. That's the first thing. They don't know that. They don't know that.
Thank you.
Pete, we're all working together. We kind of work hand in hand, kind of a joint effort, getting television done, for example. And we share a lot of stuff, and we same editors, and we do a lot of work together. So one of the things that I'm doing in addition to that, because we don't know about next year.
Yeah.
I had a television show, Angelo. I've had a television show since 1974. I mean, that's 45 or 46 years ago. I might not have a television show next year. I don't know. The virus thing going on, the advertisers aren't stepping up and they're not signing any contracts. So we don't know about next year.
Yeah.
I don't know. So anyway, in the meantime, about 3 years ago, Bass Pro Shop, for example, had said, I need to step up my social media presence. I had guys like Winston Tucker with Favorite Rods. He had the Guggen Squad, all those high profile YouTuber guys. He said that's the way the business is going with a lot of internet sales and service. YouTube is the deal. Well, they said unless I make a big presence in the YouTube market, my television contracts are going to go downhill, with them. So I said, okay, I'll get started more. My son Scott was pretty instrumental. He had a big channel, so he helped me. And so 2.5 years ago, I got started, and now, as of today, I got almost 93,000 subscribers.
Good for you.
3 times a week, and I make some money doing it. Not a lot of money, but I make enough money to pay my editors to edit, and to do travel expenses to do it. And I give them, all my advertisers, I'm really, like Bass Pro, I'm really giving them a lot of content for nothing, for free. And so they're coming back and saying, well, Roland, you're doing such a great job with the YouTube. What we're losing in the television end of it, we're gaining on the social media end of it. And so it's all balancing out good. We're not cutting your contracts. Everybody's fine. Everybody's happy. And so now I have happy advertisers. And I'm happy because you don't have to have, now you and I, Angelo, have done some high cost regular television with green screens and with all the sound enhancements and all the super duper drone deals. But see, YouTube, you don't need that. I can go out with a little GoPro camera and just do a whole YouTube right now, just talking to you guys and just, hey folks, here we are. What's happening? I'm with Angelo and Pete. And I can make a whole YouTube in just 5 minutes. Well, and some of it can be pretty good. You have to be kind of innovative, but it doesn't require a lot of expense. It doesn't require a lot of time. Very minimal production costs, and the rewards are really good. So I'm not, I'm really in more to YouTubing than anything. I mean, I'm doing more YouTube. I do 3 YouTubes a week, so I'm doing more YouTubes than I am regular television.
You look like you're having fun doing it too. You're doing a good job. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I love about it? It's very similar to what we are now doing with these podcasts. I like the spontaneity of doing those, because having been in the broadcast business for almost 40 years, everything is taped. Sometimes I'll be honest with you, we'll shoot something this year and Pete and I won't even see it until it goes to air a year from now. Yeah. And quite honestly, you've lost the connection with that experience, that adventure. Whereas with the YouTubing stuff, it's kind of cool because it's real, it's live, it's boom, it's in your face, and good, bad, and ugly, it doesn't matter. It is what it is. And so yeah, it's pretty exciting for us too. I would hate to think that it's all going to come at the cost of broadcasting, because it's almost as long as you've been at it, it's kind of in our blood, and broadcasting is kind of the thing. But you know what? You got to move. You got to move ahead, and if that's what our future.
You know, I'm hoping that I'll still have a television show. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, in our case, it's worse than yours, because in our case, nothing's open right now up here. And I know
I haven't done much filming for next year, and I know you haven't. So you know, we're behind the 8 ball. You know.
Yeah, we've done none. So I don't know what that's going to look like for our season next year, but I guess, you know, maybe we should look at it as part of the adventure and part of the excitement of not knowing for a change in our lives, because usually everything we do is kind of already set in stone for months ahead of time. So who knows? Hey, take a couple more questions, and then I think we've got to let you go, because I know you want to go fishing today. Tell us before we move on.
I got to do a YouTube video. Number one.
You got to do a YouTube video.
I got actually a business call with Johnny Morris.
Okay. So, question for you. You told me last week that you were out fishing in a canoe.
Oh yeah.
Tell me about that.
I sent Mike Mooring, one of your editors. I sent him a bunch of canoe pictures. I don't know if he's got them, but I got a little 17-foot Old Town, and I got it set up a couple different ways. Some of the areas that I fish, you can use a trolling motor, and some of the areas I fish, you can't use a trolling motor just because of the some of the state, regulations are different, you know. And then some have access with no trailers. You have to carry your canoes in, and others have access where you can just all kind of crazy stuff. But there's some really good Everglades fishing, for example, that are available through either a small aluminum boat or a canoe. I've been doing a lot of that.
I got to tell you, when you told me you were fishing out of a canoe in the Everglades, I was a little bit concerned. I'm thinking, do I really want to go in a canoe in the Everglades, knowing that there's all kinds of opportunities to slip in that water and get chomped down by a gator?
The gators don't bother you. They really don't. You know, gators don't.
What's your biggest bass so far out of a canoe, Roland? You got any real giants?
The other day, that 9-pound 9.39 that I showed. Did I show you that picture? Or no?
No, Mike, have you got the picture?
Did it pull you around, Roland?
Is that it?
No, that's not the one. No, that's only 8 pounds. That's an 8 pound.
A little bigger than that.
Wow.
Put it up full screen if you can get it when you get it, Mike.
I'll show you. Here it is, right here.
9 pounds out of a canoe. I can't even imagine. There it is.
Is that it, Roland, there? Is this it here on the screen?
That's another big one. That was almost 8 pounds. That was 7.89. That was a big one, but this is the 8-pounder. This is the.
Oh my God!
I can't see it.
Twist your phone over. No, it's gone.
Oh. Here.
Oh my God! I can see it right there. Right there.
Huge.
That's 9.39. I got that 2 days ago.
Oh my God! How'd you catch him, Roland? Where'd you get him on?
Well, I was in the canoe, and I've been really doing a lot with the whopper plopper lately. You know, a lot of those big fish are whopper plopper fish, and I use that big 130, the great big whopper plopper. I don't have any kind of deal with whopper plopper. I just use it because it's a good lure.
It works.
I do have a deal with Yamamoto, and I use their hardtail grub a lot. They're 4.5 hardtail.
Oh yeah.
And I put them on a great big hook, and I put a weight on front. I was using 50-pound braid, and so I actually was throwing the hardtail, and that big fish here, the hardtail. So, wow. A couple other big ones. I was with that guy that I was showing him how to cast, and see, he really had never caught but a couple fish over 5 pounds, and that day, one day he caught 5 really good ones, or 4.5.
There it is.
7 pounds. Yeah, that's
God.
Man.
That's
crazy.
4.39.
How different is that experience catching them out of canoe than it is a boat?
Well, the only problem with the canoe, you're kind of balancing all the time, and you can't swing around this way. So you got to kind of paddle the boat or move it with a trolling motor or however you're doing to get in the right position, because you just can't turn around and it's just you have only a very, very small window of casting opportunity.
I couldn't help.
Power pole. I put the power pole down, and it helps. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The audience has probably been asking themselves, why aren't they talking about everything that's up on the wall behind you? Obviously, you spend a lot of time hunting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I do a lot of hunting. I'm a real good turkey hunter. I'm really, really into turkeys more than probably anything else. And I've killed just hundreds of turkeys in dozens and dozens of states and Canada. So yeah, I've done a lot of turkey hunting.
Interesting.
What do we got? Everybody's saying they've been to your YouTube channel and all that good stuff. And somebody's talking about your canoe trip on there. What do we got? Check out YouTube for Wabakimi canoe trip. Oh, they got a 40-inch, wherever that is, they got a 40-inch pike in a canoe.
48 pike. Oh boy, that's good.
That would pull your canoe around pretty good, wouldn't it not?
Oh, yeah.
That would be ridiculous.
Well, I told you one of the wildest experiences I ever had, and it's similar concept is catching pike out of a float tube.
Oh yeah,
because you got no control at all.
Right.
They literally just pull you at random around the lake. I mean, it's just crazy.
Unique, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get Roland a few of those rapid fire questions, Ange.
Good idea.
Roland, I'm just gonna give you these questions. There's two answers. I need one answer. Okay, I'm gonna give you a situation for the rest of your life. If you can only pick one, I want you to pick one of the two. Okay. Understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you could only fish saltwater or freshwater, what would you fish the rest of your life? Freshwater. If you, for largemouth bass, could only fish topwater or crankbaits, what would you fish?
Topwater.
Very quick on that one. Would you rather fish for northern pike or barracuda? You can only keep one the rest of your life. Fish for one. Ooh, got him.
I don't care for either one of them.
That's a great answer. I like that even better. Okay, the last one I got. If you could only fish one part of the United States for bass, would it be the northern part of the United States or the southern part of the United States?
I'd have to take the southern. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're going to talk about smallmouth, that's a whole different ballgame.
Right.
Smallmouth resurgence this year is better than ever. So yeah, smallmouth is a pretty big deal.
But for largemouth, the southern U.S. obviously, right?
Yeah.
Right on. That's it. That's what I got, Angelo.
So my only question to you before we part our ways, for anybody out there watching that loves to fish largemouth bass in the dead of winter and wants to either experience their first trip to Florida or maybe they're regular bass fishermen to Florida during the winter months, give me the best time and place for them to do it.
Okay, around the full moon periods of December, January, and February are good spawns going on. And if you couple that up with the warm weather, now here's the problem. In January, there's a couple cold fronts that are going to just cripple the fishing, dropping the water temperature from say 75 degrees to say 65 degrees, and that's bad for Florida. I mean, down around 60 degrees, you're just not going to catch much anything. So you have to avoid the cold fronts. If you can avoid the cold fronts and get a warming trend 3 or 4 days before the full moon of November, December, January, or February, or March even, you'd have the best chance of having a lot of success. And I have to say, normally this year at Okeechobee, we had kind of a crummy year because water levels were bad and the weeds are almost non-existent. But the bright side is there's always the next year, and the weeds are coming back, and I think we'll have a better fishery again maybe this coming year. So Okeechobee would be my bet for those months.
So Okeechobee would be your number one lake in Florida?
It would be year in and year out. I mean, I had a bad year this year because of the water levels and weed control, but it's going to get better.
Okay.
What's your favorite place to fish in Canada? Dean Talbot asked that.
I think we've already answered that. I think he did anyway.
All of Canada.
Lake of the
Lake of the Woods again. You know, really a good place. But I fished, you know, Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and I fished, you know, British Columbia, and I fished New Brunswick for smallmouth, and I fished Nova Scotia with you guys for tuna. So I mean, I fished just about everywhere. I fished the Casbah. That's up in the way north.
Yeah.
Good for you, man. Well, listen, I can't, you know, I won't say thank you because that would be understating it. We just appreciate you taking the time to join us, and I urge everybody that maybe just met Mr. Martin for the first time today, although you'd be a rare bird if you did, but I urge you to get to his YouTube channel and get familiar with this guy because he is a game changer. He can make all the difference in the world in your fishing life for sure. In a lot of cases, he can make a difference in your life, period, like he has for Pete and I. Just a great gentleman, great outdoorsman, and just a passionate angler. And we appreciate everything you do for us, Roland.
All right, let's keep it up. I mean, we got a lot of things to do, and a lot of places we haven't fished, and a lot of places.
You're right, buddy. Here. We will do it for sure.
So thank you, everybody, for joining us. You can reach out to us at the usual contact points. Roland Martin is available all throughout the social media array, I'm sure, and emails. If you have something particular that you'd like to ask him and can't reach him, by all means, drop it off to Fishing Canada, fishingcanada.com, or Angelo at Fishing Canada, or Pete at Fishing Canada. All the usual suspects, and we'll make sure that Roland gets it and gets back to you. Roland, thank you, my friend. Have a great day YouTubing today. And don't fall out of the canoe, please.
Okay.
All right, Roland. See you, buddy.
Take care.
See you later.
Take care.
We're in for fishing.